Chapter 363. In the inner courtyard of the Sword Sect Pagoda, on a tall mountain peak, an incomparably magnificent and solemn hall was located within. This was the core of the inner courtyard, and also the place where the upper echelons of the Sword Sect Pagoda discussed matters. At this moment, Qing He, Gu Tuo, Shi Yun and many other elders of the inner courtyard had all appeared in the hall. On a high platform in the middle, the white-robed great elder Qiu Shan sat cross-legged on a praying mat with a solemn expression. How is this possible? The Great Wall of the Desolate Border is not only guarded by the army of the Saint Yuan dynasty, but also many life and death gate elders of the seven great forces. In addition, there is also the great General Juanzhan of the Desolate Border. He is a divine dwelling stage expert. Elder Qing He's voice was filled with disbelief. The Great Wall of the Desolate Border was located at the border of the Great Desolate Mansion, adjacent to the land of the five elements. Several hundred years ago, a powerful expert had appeared in the barbarian race of the land of the five elements. He had condensed the five ancestral totems and was known as the Five-Crown King. At that time, the strength of the barbarian race had reached its peak. Even if the Saint Yuan dynasty and the seven great forces joined forces, it would still be difficult to deal with the barbarian race. During the critical period of the barbarian race's invasion, the mysterious and powerful Five-Crown Kings suddenly disappeared without a trace. This caused the barbarian race to be in chaos, which gave the Saint Yuan dynasty and the seven great forces the opportunity to defeat the barbarian race and drive them back to the land of the five elements. Since then, the Saint Yuan dynasty had built the incomparably magnificent Great Wall of the Desolate Border at the border of the Great Desolate Mansion and the land of the five elements. It was used to resist the barbarian race's invasion for a long time. Not only that, the seven great forces also had people stationed at the Great Wall of the Desolate Border for a long time. It could be said that the Great Wall of the Desolate Border was the strongest line of defense against the barbarian race. However, news had spread in the past few days that the Great Wall of the Desolate Border had been breached and the great General Juanzhan, who was stationed at the border, had died in battle. This news was no different from a bolt from the blue, and it shook the entire Saint Yuan dynasty and the seven great forces. What the hell is going on? That General Juanzhan is an expert of the divine dwelling stage. Even if the barbarian race also has a divine dwelling stage expert, he should be able to escape even if he can't win, another elder said in confusion. The divine dwelling stage was already considered the top experts in the Saint Origin Empire and the surrounding regions. Logically speaking, if such a powerhouse wanted to escape, it would be very difficult to make him stay. Another impressive expert has appeared in the barbarian tribe, Qiu Shan said calmly. What? Could it be another Five-Crown King? The expressions of the many elders below changed upon hearing this. That's not necessarily the case. That expert from the Brute tribe is known as the Heavenly Barbarian King. Although his strength is not as strong as the Five-Crown King from hundreds of years ago, he has also reached the peak of the divine dwelling realm. That's why Fang Zhan did not even have the chance to retreat, Qiu Shan said. If that's the case, I'm afraid only several divine dwelling experts will have a chance to deal with the Heaven Barbarian King, Elder Qing He said thoughtfully. Yes, it's not just the Heaven Barbarian King. There's another young genius in the barbarian tribe. He's called the Four-Crown King. I'm afraid his talent is not much weaker than the Five-Crown King from hundreds of years ago, Qiu Shan said. I heard that the Four-Crown King is extremely arrogant. He even said that he would sweep away all the top heaven prides of the seven great forces by himself. The ignorant are really fearless, Elder Gu Tuo said with a cold smile. Whether it's the Heaven Barbarian King or the Four-Crown King, we have to treat them with caution. 1/3 of the hundreds of cities in the Great Desolate Prefecture have fallen into the hands of the barbarian race. 7 days later, the seven great forces will hold an exchange meeting in the Great Desolate Prefecture's northern Liang City to discuss countermeasures against the barbarian race. You should instruct the disciples to get ready, Qiu Shan said. Yes. The many Inner Institute elders gave a cupped fist salute and then left to make preparations. If the Four-Crown King grows up, he will definitely be a great threat. Among the top heaven prides of the seven great forces, There are very few who can compete with him, Qiu Shan said with a deep look in his eyes. He suddenly thought of Yiguchen. Even though he'd always been prejudiced against Yiguchen, he had no choice but to admit now that Yiguchen was indeed worthy of being number one amongst the inner court disciples of the Sword Sect's forest of pagodas, and it was even to the extent that Yan Wushuang was slightly inferior to him. Yiguchen, will you be able to shock everyone in the fight against the barbarian race this time? Qiu Shan thought to himself. After the meeting, the entire Sword Sect Pagoda Forest was filled with a rare tension. Not only the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, but the entire Saint Origin dynasty, including the 7 great forces, were also mobilized. In the western part of the Saint Origin dynasty, the base of the limitless Sword Sect, Spirit Heaven Mountain. A young man in a black and white Taoist robe was sitting under a lone pine tree on the peak of a mountain. He had long black and white hair that fluttered in the wind. His eyes were like stars and his aura was deep and long. He was the top heaven pride of the limitless sword sect, Xian Hao. After the void sword realm, Xian Hao had been recuperating, cultivating and calming his mind. Not far away, 2 figures suddenly appeared and walked over slowly. The 2 figures were a man and a woman. The man was dressed in white. He was tall and had a jade-like appearance. The woman was dressed in a black dress. Her face was delicate and charming, bright and charming. Most importantly, this pair of man and woman actually had similar facial features. They were twins of different sexes. Xian Hao, it won't be long before we head to the Great Desolation Prefecture, northern Liang City. Don't miss it, the man in white said with a faint smile. Xian Hao did not even raise his eyes. Seeing Xian Hao's attitude, the woman in the black dress curled her lips and said with a hint of sarcasm, "My brother Feng came here to remind you out of kindness. TSK, didn't the trip to the Void Sword Realm wake you up?" Boom. Just as the woman in the black dress finished her words, Xian Hao suddenly opened his eyes and a strong and boundless aura spread out. "Xian Dai, how dare you be presumptuous in front of me?" Xian Hao said coldly. "Xian Hao, I'm afraid it's ungentlemanly to treat a woman like this." The man in white stepped forward and his tone became indifferent. "Brother Feng, I'm so scared." The woman called Xian Dai's delicate body was tightly attached to the man in white, but her tone was playful. "Did the failure in the Void Sword Realm give you the confidence to provoke me? I, Xian Hao, will accompany you anytime." Xian Hao's eyes were as sharp as swords. The man and woman's faces changed slightly, but there was not much fear in their eyes. "Then let's see who can help the sect to win first place in the exchange." The man in white did not say anything more and left with the woman in the black dress. Xian Hao's face turned cold as he looked at their backs. The man and woman were called Xian Feng and Xian Dai. They were both supreme talents of the 9 Changes Divine Soul Realm. They had another name in the Saint Origin dynasty, Black and White Impermanence. They were also the most outstanding supreme talents of the limitless sword sect other than Xian Hao. Their strength did not lie in their individual strength. Instead, when they worked together, the superimposed strength caused Xian Hao to be extremely fearful. However, Xian Hao did not see them as competitors. The opponent he recognized was Yiguchen. "It's a pity that you're already dead. Otherwise, I'd really like to fight with you again in the exchange." Xian Hao found it hard to calm down when he thought of the various things that happened in the Void Sword Realm. As a supreme talent, this was the first time he was in such a sorry state, losing repeatedly in the hands of others. However, in Xian Hao's eyes, Yiguchen was already dead. Obviously, a dead person had no value. Xian Hao heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he felt it was a pity that he had missed an opponent. Yiguchen is already dead. Then there are not many people who can threaten me. The young war emperor, LV Qinghun, and Gu Zun. Xian Hao's eyes were deep as he looked into the distance. Chapter 364. In a desolate mountain range in the north of the Saint Origin dynasty, a towering pitch-black city stood there, giving off a domineering aura. This city was where the saber-sealing monarch palace resided. At this moment, a black-clothed youth was sitting on top of a tall building in the city. Around his body, There was a black stream of genuine chi swirling around like black pythons. It looked cold and terrifying. There was a saber on his knees. The saber was pitch black and covered in demonic runes. It looked like it could cut through one's gaze. He was the strongest of the 3 sabers in the saber-sealing monarch palace, Lung Ju. I must take first place in the competition between the 7 forces. It's a pity that Yi Guqin is dead. Otherwise, I would like to experience the feeling of defeating the sword sect with my own hands. Lung Ju's tone was cold and indifferent. At the same time, Lung Ju looked at the other side of the city. There was a mountain with a pitch-black cave on top of it. Gu Zun, you have been in seclusion in the Saber King's ancient cave for an entire year. What are you trying to comprehend? Lung Ju thought. As the strongest of the 3 sabers and the second on the heavenly saber list, he was invincible among the younger generation in the saber-sealing monarch palace. He was only wary of Gu Zun. If Lung Ju was a genius in the saber Dao, then Gu Zun was a genius. Gu Zun's obsession with the saber surprised Lung Ju. Many disciples in the saber-sealing monarch palace even called Gu Zun a madman behind his back. However, they didn't dare to say it out loud. It wasn't just because Gu Zun was strong and ranked first on the heavenly saber list, it was also because of his identity. He was the only direct disciple of Huangdao Yufan. Will you go to this exchange meeting or not? Lung Ju muttered to himself. In the Saber King's ancient cave, it was dark and gloomy. Countless broken sabers filled the entire ancient cave. In the deepest part of the ancient cave, a skinny figure sat quietly with his legs crossed. It was a youth. His hair was messy and his beard was unshaven. His clothes were tattered and emitted an unpleasant smell. His skin was also covered in stains, and there were also many knife marks all over it. In the deepest part of the Saber King's ancient cave, the saber chi in the void was already incomparably sharp. It was not something an ordinary disciple could withstand. However, the saber chi was no longer a threat to the sloppy figure in front of him. In front of the unkempt young man, there was an ancient rusty saber stabbed into the ground. At the same time, there was a simple cut on the wall in front of him. The sloppy youth occasionally looked at the rusty ancient saber and occasionally looked at the saber mark on the cave wall. He read it for an entire year. For the past year, he did not eat or drink. He only consumed spirit pills and spirit pills. The rest of the time, he just stared blankly at the ancient saber and the saber mark. His pitch-black eyes were bloodshot, as if he had been possessed. A peerless saber strike, a peerless saber strike. He muttered as if he had lost his mind. Tap, tap. Following a series of footsteps, a middle-aged man in a golden robe with a slightly aged face walked to the deepest part of the cave and stared at the sloppy young man who had been sitting with his legs crossed the whole time. Gu Zun, it has already been a year. The middle-aged man let out a sigh. If there were any disciples of the saber-conferred monarch palace here, they would definitely recognize this middle-aged man. He was the vice-palace master of the saber-conferred monarch palace, Imperial Saber Yu Bufan. It's not enough. It's still not enough. I have yet to comprehend the peerless saber strike. The sloppy youth named Gu Zun shook his head. This peerless blade, even I have only comprehended 30% of it. Relying on this 30%, I am able to fight evenly with Feng Manlu on the Violet Peak. As for you, Gu Zun, you have already comprehended 50% of it. You are more outstanding than your master. Yu Bufan's eyes were filled with gratification but also a complicated expression. Gu Zun was his only successor and also the person who would represent him at the Violet Peak. Feng Manlu, the 10-year deadline is approaching. Who will you choose? Yan Wushuang? Yu Bufan thought inwardly. He had thought about Yi Guqin before, but there was news that Yi Guqin had died in the Void Sword realm. As for Bai Zichen, Yuan Mie, and the other Sword Dao geniuses, although they were not bad, they had not reached the peak. Therefore, in Yu Bufan's eyes, Feng Manlu's only choice in the entire Sword Sect Pagoda Forest was Yan Wushuang. However, Yu Bufan was confident that Yan Wushuang would not be a match for Gu Zun. Gu Zun was the most suitable person to practice the saber among all the people that Yu Bufan had seen. Gu Zun's obsession and craziness sometimes made Yu Bufan amazed. He believed that there were not many people in the Saint Origin dynasty who were more talented than Gu Zun in the saber Dao. If the sword sect's Yi Guchen was still alive, he might have a chance to fight against Gu Zun. But if it's Yen Wushuang Win Sweeping Tower, you've already lost this battle of the Forbidden City. Yu Bufan thought to himself. He shook his head and left, not bothering Gu Zun anymore. After Yu Bufan left, Gu Zun's bloodshot eyes looked at the rusty ancient saber in front of him. He murmured, "Not enough. Still not enough. I need to kill more people to test this saber." Gu Zun murmured. He suddenly stood up, stretched out his hands, grasped the handle of the ancient saber and pulled it out. Rumble. At this moment, the Saber King's ancient cave trembled violently. The terrifying tremors even spread out of the mountain and across the entire steel city. Bang! Gu Zun roared as he pulled out the ancient rusty blade that even the hall master of the sealed blade monarch hall couldn't pull out. As soon as the ancient saber was drawn out, a terrifying murderous aura burst out like an ancient demonic mountain. If it were an ordinary person, they would have been so scared that they would have collapsed to the ground and their minds would have gone blank. But Gu Zun did not seem to be affected at all. 7 kills. The name of the saber is 7 kills. Gu Zun's hand brushed across the rusty body of the saber. The 2 ancient words 7 kills were engraved on the blade. He carried the saber and walked out of the Saber King's ancient cave. His target was the great desolate mansion, not the so-called exchange meeting in northern Liang City. He decided to go alone to the city that was occupied by the barbarian race. He needed to kill more people to test out his peerless saber. On this day, Gu Zun, who was known as the Saber Maniac, finally left the sealed Saber King Palace after a year of seclusion. He wanted to use the 7 kills ancient saber to test his saber Dao and shake the entire dynasty. In the eastern part of the Saint Origin dynasty, in a valley where flowers bloomed, many exquisite and gorgeous palaces and pavilions stood in the valley, contrasting beautifully with the flowers. This was the residence of one of the 7 major forces, the Consonance Palace. In one of the secluded courtyards, a figure in pink was playing the zither, and the sound of the zither was sorrowful. Her face was beautiful and she was naturally beautiful. At this moment, there was sadness and loneliness in her eyes. She was Zither Fairy. Unknowingly, a beautiful figure in snow-white clothes stood quietly behind Zither Fairy. After a while, Zither Fairy finally noticed. She turned her head and said, "So it's Senior Sister Lu." The woman in front of him was dressed in a snow-white robe. Her skin was as smooth as jade, and she had a natural sense of beauty. It was as if she was a piece of jade that had been meticulously carved by the heavens. She had a head of black hair and a white dress, revealing a classical temperament. She was as cold as smoke. She was like a fairy from the Moon Palace, outstanding and otherworldly. She was the top prodigy of the Consonance Palace, Lu Qinghan. The sound of your zither is sad and sorrowful. It's like you're mourning, and it's even filled with longing. Let me guess, is it because of the fallen sword master? LV Qinghan's voice was like a clear spring, and it was extremely pleasant. Senior sister? The Zither Fairy lowered her head slightly with sorrow in her eyes. It's a pity that I didn't get to see the sword master. I want to see what kind of person he is to make you miss him day and night. But it seems that I don't have the chance anymore. Lu Qinghan shook her head slightly, feeling that it was a pity. If Senior Sister Lu can see Mr. Yi, you will definitely be impressed. The Zither Fairy said. Oh, is that so? My taste is not low. Lu Qinghan raised her brows. Her temperament was indifferent. Although she wasn't an arrogant person, she wasn't someone ordinary people could touch. There were very few people who could make Lu Qinghan, a prodigy, look at them differently. Sigh. It's a pity that the sword master has fallen. Junior sister, listen to senior sister's advice. People have to look forward. It's useless to linger on the past. Lu Qinghan sighed. Hearing that, the Zither Fairy's beautiful face became slightly cold. She said, Senior sister, do you want to recommend Zhou Tong to Zither Fairy again? Zhou Tong is one of the 3 little kings, the little spiritual king. His strength is only second to the little war emperor. Moreover, his character, temperament, and strength are all excellent. Senior sister's taste won't be wrong. Lu Qinghan smiled faintly. Previously, the Zither fairy said that Lu Qinghan would definitely be impressed by Yi Guqin. Lu Qinghan said that it wasn't certain. But now, she approved of Zhou Tong. Obviously, she thought that Yi Guqin could at most be on par with Zhou Tong in all aspects. Thank you for your kindness, senior sister. But Zither fairy doesn't have any feelings for Zhou Tong. The Zither fairy lowered her eyes and said, "Sigh, silly junior sister. Senior sister admits that the sword master does have some ability. But thinking about someone who has already passed away will only increase the sadness. That Zhou Tong is very good to you. He even said that he wanted to visit you." Lu Qinghan said. In the past, she had met the Little War Emperor and Zhou Tong by chance in a secret place. In the end, they found an opportunity together and formed a good relationship. Once, Zhou Tong met the Zither fairy by chance. He couldn't forget her and wanted Lu Qinghan to be the matchmaker. Seeing that the Zither fairy was depressed day by day, Lu Qinghan was also willing to be the matchmaker and help the Zither fairy find new happiness. Senior sister, the Zither fairy is tired. The Zither fairy didn't want to contradict Lu Qinghan, because she knew that Lu Qinghan really cared about her. But how could Lu Qinghan know the position that Yi Guqin had in the Zither fairy's heart? Seeing that the Zither fairy seemed to be dispirited, Lu Qinghan shook her head and said, "All right. You should prepare. In a few days, follow me to the northern Liang city to participate in the exchange of the 7 major forces. Zhou Tong and the others will also go." Lu Qinghan thought to herself. At worst, she could matchmake Zhou Tong and the Zither fairy in the northern Liang city. Yes. The Zither fairy nodded faintly. Her mood was still not high. Seeing this, Lu Qinghan didn't say anything. In her opinion, time would eventually erase everything. There would be a day when the Zither fairy would come to terms with it. At that time, she believed that the Zither fairy would accept Zhou Tong's love. Lu Qinghan's figure drifted away like smoke. The Zither fairy's beautiful eyes were bleak and the sound of her zither sobbed. "Young Master Yi, how good would it be if you were still here?" Chapter 365. Yi Guqin, who was in seclusion in the Sword Sect Pagoda, naturally did not know that there was a woman in the distance who missed him day and night. Right now, all of his mental strength was placed on comprehending. Yi Guqin quietly sat cross-legged in the world of 10,000 swords. His body was faintly emitting a sharp aura like that of a sword. Of course, this change was still very superficial. After all, Yi Guqin had only comprehended the unity of man and sword for a few days. Previously, Yi Guqin had taken a long time to comprehend the illuminated sword heart. Comprehending the sword Tao was much more difficult than comprehending sword intent. But Yi Guqin had relied on the experience of his previous life, the enlightenment leaf, and the help of the world of 10,000 swords. His comprehension of the unity of man and sword was also very fast. In his heart, the bud of the sword heart seed had already opened a little more. When it completely sprouted, Yi Guqin would comprehend the unity of man and sword. After sitting cross-legged for a long time, Yi Guqin opened his eyes. He slowly raised his hand, and a sharp sword light pulsed between his fingers. This was not a sword ray formed by the 6 pulses divine sword, but a sword ray formed by his physical body. Yi Guqin recalled that Feng Manlu had not used any sword when he attacked. He had only used his fingers as a sword, and when he pointed out, it was as if a sharp sword had pierced the sky. At that time, Feng Manlu was like a sword that could split the sky, displaying its sharpness. It was also because Feng Manlu had comprehended the unity of man and sword that he possessed such terrifying fighting strength. He could even fight across realms, and even half-step divine dwelling experts like Xian Tai were afraid of him. Of course, Yi Guqin's current comprehension of the unity of man and sword was far from Feng Manlu's level. After all, Feng Manlu had been in seclusion on the 8th floor of the Sword Sect Pagoda for nearly 10 years. In addition to Feng Manlu's talent in the Sword Tao, his understanding of the unity of man and sword had most likely reached an extremely profound level. The current Yiguchen had only just crossed the threshold of the unity of man and sword. However, Yiguchen also knew that this kind of thing could not be rushed. He could only slowly comprehend it. However, Yiguchen's gains were not limited to this. He slowly raised his hand, and the genuine qi in his body gushed out. Unparalleled sword qi seemed to gather in his palm, and finally formed a slightly illusory golden lotus. If one were to examine it carefully, one would be surprised to see that every petal of this lotus was condensed from sword qi. Yiguchen gently flicked his finger. The golden sword lotus drew a line in the air and swept forward. Then, it expanded and turned into a huge golden sword lotus amidst the soaring sword qi. As the lotus spun, an unparalleled sword qi seemed capable of tearing apart the world. This was the sword sect's ultimate technique, reincarnation sword lotus. Because Yiguchen's true qi was golden, the reincarnation sword lotus was also golden in color. However, a moment later, the sword lotus that was rotating in the void suddenly became unstable and shattered into violent sword qi that filled the sky. The sword sect's ultimate technique is indeed not that easy to cultivate. Yiguchen sighed when he saw this. He had spent a few days on the 8th floor of the sword sect pagoda and consumed another 3 epiphany leaves. However, he could only perform the initial stage of the reincarnation sword lotus. The difficulty of cultivating the sword sect's ultimate technique was no less than that of a supreme king-level sword technique. Most importantly, this was not the complete version of the reincarnation sword lotus. Yiguchen found it hard to imagine how difficult it was to cultivate the complete version of the reincarnation sword lotus. The current me can only perform 18 leaves of the reincarnation sword lotus at most, and it is not very stable. However, even an incomplete reincarnation sword lotus has 72 leaves, Yiguchen thought to himself. The more leaves the reincarnation sword lotus had, the stronger its power. The current Yiguchen could only perform 18 leaves of the reincarnation sword lotus at most. On the other hand, the reincarnation sword lotus that Feng Manlu performed that day had 72 leaves. It seems that cultivating the reincarnation sword lotus is not something that can be accomplished overnight. Now that I've reached the threshold of becoming one with the sword, I've also begun to understand the reincarnation sword lotus. I should leave first, Yiguchen thought to himself. He did not forget his goal, which was to go to the 5-elemental land to find the sacred herb. Su Jianchu's situation could not be delayed. Yiguchen left the sword sect pagoda in a flash. After not coming out for a long time, Yiguchen took a deep breath. He had gained a lot in the sword sect pagoda this time. The embryonic form of the edgeless sword intent had taken shape, and he had also begun to understand the mysteries of becoming one with the sword. He had also learned the reincarnation sword lotus. As for the complete version, Yiguchen believed that it should be on the 9th floor. However, with Yiguchen's current cultivation, it was difficult for him to even condense the 72 leaves of the reincarnation sword lotus. Therefore, he was not in a hurry. Yiguchen left the sword sect pagoda. Along the way, he was surprised to find that the entire inner court seemed empty. Why is there no one here? Yiguchen frowned slightly. At this moment, an inner court disciple came over. When he saw Yiguchen, his eyes were filled with surprise. He hurriedly went forward and cupped his hands together. Senior brother Yi, you finally come out. Yiguchen looked at the inner court disciple in front of him. He realized that the inner court disciple's attitude towards him seemed to be even more respectful than before. What happened? Yiguchen asked. It's like this. The inner court disciple recounted the recent news in detail. I see. The barbarian race has already breached the Great Wall of the Desolate Border. The 7 great factions have sent their elders and disciples to the Great Desolate Mansion to participate in the exchange and discuss countermeasures. Yiguchen thought to himself. Previously, Lord Feng Manlu instructed that no one is to disturb senior brother Yi. He also said that after senior brother comes out of seclusion, if you have nothing else to do, you can ride the Green Sky Eagle to the Great Desolate Mansion's northern Liang City to participate in the exchange. The disciple said respectfully. Yes, I understand. Yiguchen nodded slightly. Previously, Chu Qingqi had explained it to him. Naturally, he knew the significance of the exchange. If the Limitless Sword Sect or the Saber-conferred King's Palace were to obtain first place again, it would be extremely disadvantageous for the Great Desolate Sect. It would be extremely disadvantageous for the elders and disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Association, and they would have to pay a huge price. As a member of the Sword Sect Pagoda Association, Yiguchen naturally had to do his part. Moreover, the news of his return had not been leaked. Therefore, Yiguchen was now a secret trump card that would have unexpected effects. However, before going to the Great Desolate Mansion, I still have somewhere to go. Yiguchen thought to himself as he found the Green Sky Eagle. Yiguchen rode the Green Sky Eagle and directly left the Sword Whisper mountain range. Before going to the Great Desolate Mansion, he still had to go to two places. The first place was the Sword Whisper Steel in the Beichen Mansion. Yiguchen's strength had increased again and he could enter the Heavenly Path Sword Realm in the Sword Whisper Steel to collect the Sky-Splitting Sword Soul again. The second place was the Honorable Cave Abode in the Heavenly Wasteland Plains. Yiguchen knew that this trip to the Great Desolate Mansion was extremely dangerous. Whether it was the threat from the barbarian race's holy sons and holy daughters or the 7 great factions, Yiguchen had to be vigilant. Moreover, he also had to consider entering the 5 Elements Temple to obtain the sacred elixir. Therefore, Yiguchen had to increase his strength again to have some assurance. Chapter 366. About a day later, Yiguchen arrived at the sword-seeking steel of the Beichen Mansion. The sword-seeking steel at the top of the Sky Sword Peak was still in ruins. Coming to this familiar place, Yiguchen's eyes had a touch of melancholy. He unconsciously thought of Situ Hongxue. He thought of the few days he spent with Situ Hongxue, honing their swordsmanship, hunting demonic beasts, and barbecuing. That was also a rare leisure time for Yiguchen. But now things had changed. Situ Hongxue disappeared without a trace like a wisp of smoke. In the entire Saint Origin dynasty, there was no news about Situ Hongxue. This woman, who was once famous in the dynasty, seemed to have disappeared from the world. No one mentioned her. But when he thought of the old woman with a high realm beside Situ Hongxue, Yiguchen felt that Situ Hongxue might have left the Saint Origin dynasty and gone to the wider world of the Nantian region. I don't know if we can meet again. Yiguchen shook his head slightly and stopped thinking about it. If fate brought them together, they would meet again. If not, then forget about each other. Yiguchen activated the sequence emblem on the back of his hand and entered the Heavenly Law Sword Realm. With his current strength of the Divine Soul 6 transformation, he absorbed another 20,000 sword souls. After absorbing 20,000 sword souls, Yiguchen felt that his body was bloated, so he stopped. Now, there are 30,000 sword souls in my body. As the number of sword souls increases, the power will be greatly enhanced. I will come back for the remaining sword souls in the future. Yiguchen did not force it. With his current strength, he could only accommodate 30,000 sword souls. After that, Yiguchen left the sword-seeking steel. After another day, Yiguchen arrived at the Heavenly Wasteland Plain. Yiguchen always had a feeling that there was an undiscovered secret in the Heavenly Wasteland Plain. But now, with his current strength, he could not find out anything. Therefore, Yiguchen did not think too much and went directly to the venerable cave mansion. Yiguchen saw the ancient stone forest from afar. In the sky above the stone forest, the 72-leaf reincarnation sword lotus was still spinning. Accompanied by the rotation of the sword lotus, countless sharp and fierce sword qis gushed out without rest. With this method left behind by Feng Manlu, the venerable cave mansion was extremely safe and would not be taken by outsiders. Yiguchen looked around and found that there was no one around. His figure flashed and directly entered the cave mansion. Yiguchen had been to the venerable immortal's cave twice. The first time, he broke in with the others. The second time, Yiguchen entered alone and obtained the enlightenment leaf and the blood cloud centipede. However, Yiguchen knew that the value of a venerable's cave abode could not be so little. Otherwise, Qiu Shan would not have been so eager to get Yiguchen to hand over the cave mansion. When Yiguchen entered the cave mansion last time, he also found a layer of light barrier in the depths of the cave mansion. Yiguchen could not break the light barrier with his strength at that time, so he could only give up. But now, Yiguchen's strength had skyrocketed, so he could give it a try. Soon he arrived in front of the light barrier. Without hesitation, Yiguchen directly unleashed his strongest combat strength. He brandished the Xianming heavy sword and unleashed the Azura sword intent. He directly performed the first move of the 10,000 God tribulation, destruction of heaven and earth. The terrifying sword chi gathered at one point, as if it could destroy everything, and directly bombarded the light barrier. This kind of attack was originally very penetrating, and Yiguchen had already unleashed a powerful strength. As expected, this layer of light trembled violently, and then with a bang, it shattered into countless specks of light. After breaking this layer of light barrier, Yiguchen entered deeper into the cave mansion. After walking for about 15 minutes, Yiguchen's footsteps suddenly stopped. The reason for that was because he had discovered a figure standing there silently, emitting a cold, murderous aura. Yiguchen frowned and raised his vigilance to the highest level. In the venerable cave mansion, the slightest negligence could cost one's life. Yiguchen released his spiritual perception, and to his surprise, the figure did not have a trace of life aura. Yiguchen's footsteps slowly approached. Only then did he see the figure clearly. The figure was covered in a ferocious blood-red armor. The armor was covered with ferocious thorns, as if it was made of solidified blood, and densely covered the figure's entire body. There was even a layer of armor on the figure's face, making him look like an Azura demon. At the same time, the figure was holding a blood-red longsword in his hand. The edge on one side of the sword was also serrated, like the teeth of a shark. It looked rather murderous and bloody. Whether it was the armor or the sword, there were some cracks all over it, as if it had been greatly damaged. Even so, Yiguchen could see that the armor and sword were extraordinary, and even seemed like a set of divine weapons. Just as Yiguchen walked within 100 feet of the figure in the blood-red armor seemed to have awakened. He directly waved the blood-red longsword in his hand and charged at Yiguchen. Yiguchen's expression changed slightly. The figure in the blood-red armor did not move, but once he moved, his power was monstrous. The blood-red sword light shocked Yiguchen. Boom! Inside the cave mansion, a great battle unfolded. Yiguchen burst out with all his strength. He held the Xianming heavy sword and summoned 360 golden sword veins. At the same time, he used the spirit-devouring secret technique, and his strength skyrocketed to the peak of the 9 transformations. Yiguchen, who had the ultimate sea of qi, no longer had any side effects after using the spirit-devouring secret technique. Therefore, Yiguchen could use this secret technique at will. God-slaying sword technique, Yama? Facing such a powerful figure in the blood-red armor, Yiguchen did not hold back at all, and directly burst out with his powerful sword move. The boundless blood-red figure rose from the ground behind Yiguchen, as if it was the Yama of the 9 serenities. A blood-red sword light followed Yiguchen's sword and swept out. Boom! As the dust scattered, the figure in the blood-red armor did not suffer any damage. Yiguchen's eyes suddenly flashed. He knew that it was all because of the blood-red armor. Boom! The blood-red armor figure's strength skyrocketed again, directly reaching the life and death challenge realm. Coupled with the defense of the blood-red armor and the offensive power of the blood-red longsword, Yiguchen immediately fell into a dangerous situation. No, this figure is not a living person, but a puppet. Yiguchen's gaze was like a long sword as he stared at the figure in the blood-red armor. Yiguchen could not be more familiar with this kind of explosive aura. It was almost the same as the blood cloud centipede. Without hesitation, Yiguchen directly summoned the blood cloud centipede and almost squeezed out the last bit of energy from the demonic cloud blood crystal. The blood cloud centipede's strength also skyrocketed to the life and death challenge realm. However, it only lasted for a few dozen breaths. Yiguchen directly ordered the blood cloud centipede to restrain the figure in the blood-red armor. As for himself, he used wave-like subtle steps, leaving behind afterimages as he circled behind the figure in the blood-red armor. He knew that the blood cloud centipede's energy source was the demonic cloud blood crystal behind its head. Therefore, Yiguchen planned to use brute force to extract the demonic cloud blood crystal. Rumble! The blood cloud centipede clashed with the figure in the blood-red armor, firmly entangling it. Yiguchen, on the other hand, attacked the back of the figure's head with his sword. However, the Xianming heavy sword was not sharpened. Therefore, Yiguchen could only put it away and condense his Jun Qi into a sword. Seems like I still need a sharpened sword. Yiguchen thought to himself as he continued to attack. Finally, in the last few breaths of time when the blood cloud centipede's energy was almost exhausted, Yiguchen seized the opportunity and pried open the mechanism at the back of the figure's head. A translucent crystal with a hazy blood mist swirling around it rolled out with a grunt. The figure in the blood-red armor suddenly froze, as if it was frozen. Yiguchen's eyes brightened. The demonic cloud blood crystal had not been consumed much. Besides, Yiguchen was also somewhat interested in the blood armor and the blood-colored longsword. Chapter 367. Yiguchen had the Xianming heavy sword. However, the Xianming heavy sword was not suitable for all sword techniques. It focused on the ferocious sword momentum that could break 10,000 kilograms. However, Yiguchen's swordsmanship was not limited to just one type. Therefore, Yiguchen needed to find another sword. As for forging his own sword, Yiguchen's current ability was still a little lacking. Moreover, he had not found his innate sword embryo. Yiguchen had long thought that if he wanted to forge his own famous sword, the innate sword embryo was indispensable. With this demonic cloud blood crystal, the blood cloud centipede can finally be of use. Yiguchen pressed the demonic cloud blood crystal into the back of the blood cloud centipede's head, and then put the puppet away. He then picked up the blood-colored longsword from the blood-armored figure's hand. After observing it closely, Yiguchen realized that, although the long sword and the blood armor were full of cracks, there were even finer vein-like patterns all over them. What a strange divine weapon! Yiguchen wanted to take off the blood armor on the puppet but found that he could not. Could it be? Yiguchen thought for a moment and began to investigate carefully. Finally, he found a small array on the back of the armor. Yiguchen did not hesitate. He extracted a drop of essence blood from his body and dripped it into the array. At the same time, he also found a small array on the hilt of the blood-colored longsword. He also dripped a drop of essence blood. Suddenly, a stream of information was transmitted into Yiguchen's mind. As expected, the longsword and armor were the same as the blood cloud puppet. They were products of the Baiming family, one of the 5 overlords of the Nantian region. The blood-colored longsword was called the Blood Prison Sword. The blood-colored armor was called the Heavenly Demon General Armor. And as Yiguchen expected, they were indeed a set of divine weapons with the same attributes. These 2 divine weapons were both supreme-grade divine weapons with mystical patterns. The only supreme-grade mystical weapon that Yiguchen had seen before was Jun Xiaoyao's sword, the Heavenly Mandate. But Yiguchen felt that the quality of the Heavenly Mandate far surpassed these 2 divine weapons. However, when he remembered that Jun Xiaoyao was a genius of the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion and one of the top 10 young masters of the Nantian region, he felt relieved. Later on, Yiguchen also learned from the information that there were several spiritual pattern arrays in the Blood Prison Sword and Heavenly Demon General Armor. However, due to the damage, only one spiritual pattern array called Blood Spirit was useful. The greatest use of this formation was that it could absorb the life force of the enemy after killing them and use it to repair its own damage. Not only that, but the Blood Spirit array could also transform blood qi into true qi and feed it back to the owner, allowing them to erupt with even more power. Yiguchen looked at the vein-like patterns on the Blood Hell Sword and Heavenly Demon General Armor and suddenly understood. It could be said that the Blood Spirit magical array alone made these 2 divine weapons extraordinarily valuable. Although these 2 divine weapons were in a damaged state, as long as they killed more people and absorbed more blood qi, there would be a day when they could be repaired. When they were completely repaired, the power of supreme-grade divine weapons with spiritual patterns could be fully unleashed. Yiguchen tried to put on the Heavenly Demon General Armor. With a thought, the heavenly demon general armor covered Yiguchen's body like a living thing, wrapping him up. Shoulder armor, breastplate, arm armor, greaves, and combat boots all appeared. Even Yiguchen's face was covered with a layer of blood-red armor. At this moment, Yiguchen was wearing the ferocious heavenly demon general armor and holding the blood hell sword. He really looked like an Azura from hell, with a murderous and cold aura. Not bad. Yiguchen was very satisfied. After putting on the heavenly demon general armor, his appearance was hidden, which was also something he could take advantage of. He waved the blood hell sword in his hand without using a trace of genuine chi, but the sharp blood-red sword light seemed to be about to leave the sword. Even in the forest of 10,000 swords, there won't be a second divine weapon like this other than the Xianming heavy sword. Yiguchen put away the blood hell sword and heavenly demon general armor. He looked around again, but he couldn't find anything else. Yiguchen went deeper into the venerable cave dwelling, and deeper in, another light curtain appeared. This light curtain was not something Yiguchen could break with his current cultivation base. It seems that the senior who left behind this cave dwelling is really cautious. He wouldn't give away the opportunity so easily, but this is also good. It will strengthen my determination to break through the life and death threshold. Yiguchen was not disappointed. Instead, he was determined. He felt that there might be traces of the sacred medicine and the enlightenment ancient tree behind this light curtain. After all, Yiguchen had already found the enlightenment leaves and branches in this cave dwelling. There was a high possibility that there was an enlightenment ancient tree inside. If he could obtain a complete enlightenment ancient tree, Yiguchen's comprehension would skyrocket again. His comprehension of various realms, sword intents, sword skills, and so on would also be faster. Therefore, Yiguchen had to explore the innermost layer in the future. After resting for a while, Yiguchen also left the venerable cave dwelling. But just as Yiguchen was about to leave the endless plains, he suddenly thought of a place. The bottomless demon abyss. Yiguchen's 5-colored golden core was obtained from a mysterious barbarian tribe corpse in the depths of the bottomless demon abyss. Yiguchen now felt that the barbarian tribe corpse's identity was definitely not ordinary. And with Yiguchen's current strength and his sea of chi, he could already guarantee that he would be able to explore the bottomless demon abyss again. Not to mention that Yiguchen's own vigorous genuine chi could block the erosion of the death chi for a long time. He also had a mysterious trump card like the Thunder Tribulation Sword that could refine the death chi. Therefore, he was not afraid of the death chi in the bottomless demon abyss. Yiguchen felt that there must be a big secret inside the bottomless demon abyss. Let's go and explore first. It won't take long anyway. Yiguchen's eyes flashed. He changed direction and flew towards the bottomless demon abyss on the green sky eagle. In just 2 hours, Yiguchen was about to reach the bottomless demon abyss. He landed directly and asked the green sky eagle to wait in place. Then he approached alone. From a few miles away, Yiguchen could see the dark death chi that seemed to have covered half of the sky. It was rolling like a black curtain. The death chi in the bottomless demon abyss seemed to be even more turbulent. Yiguchen's eyes narrowed. Just as he was about to go deeper, he suddenly saw 2 figures in front of him. Their target was also the bottomless demon abyss. There's someone else? Yiguchen stopped in his tracks. The bottomless demon abyss was a famous forbidden area in the Tianhuang Plain. Almost all the warriors in the Saint Origin dynasty knew about it. Ordinary people couldn't wait to hide. Why would they come here? Yiguchen could come here because he had the ability to overcome the erosion of the death chi. However, ordinary warriors, even if they had the hidden latch of life and death and the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth, would not dare to explore. Let's wait and see. Yiguchen did not continue to move forward. He was afraid that there would be more variables. However, what made Yiguchen's expression change slightly was that the 2 figures seemed to have discovered him and flew towards him at an extremely fast speed. Yiguchen's expression did not change. He turned around and left. "Brother, please wait." A shout came from the other side. Yiguchen continued to leave as if he did not hear it. Swoosh. At this moment, a ray of light shot out from the figure in the distance. It expanded in midair and turned into a translucent crystal cover, enveloping Yiguchen. Yi Guchen furrowed his brows. That person had taken out a divine weapon without any explanation. Wasn't that too overbearing? Yi Guchen stretched out his hand and grasped the air. His true qi condensed into a golden long sword and he swung it at the crystal cover. Along with a loud explosion, Yi Guchen's expression changed slightly. He found that the cover only trembled a little before it fell down and enveloped Yi Guchen. I told you not to leave. The two figures arrived. Yi Guchen glanced at them and his eyes narrowed. Chapter 368. Not far away, a man and a woman were walking towards them. The man was about 20 years old and was wearing a luxurious purple gold robe. His face was handsome and there was a kind smile on his face. The girl was slightly younger, about 16 or 17 years old. She was also wearing a purplish gold robe, which outlined her delicate body that was in the early stages of puberty. But there was a touch of arrogance on her face. Yi Guchen, who was covered by the crystal cover, stood there indifferently without any change in his expression. Because he had discovered that this crystal cover was a rare treasure. With his current strength, unless he exerted all his strength, it would be difficult to break it. But to reveal all his cards in front of strangers was obviously not a wise thing to do. I wonder what you two want? Yi Guchen's face was indifferent. Not to mention Yi Guchen, if it had been anyone else, they would not have been happy if they had been asked to stay by others in such a way for no reason. Hey, you really? My brother told you to stop and you kept walking. Now that you are being forced to stay, who is to blame? The girl in the purple gold robe lifted her chin slightly, showing her arrogance without a doubt. I don't know you. Do you think I will stop just because you tell me to? Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows, unable to understand this girl's brain circuit. Could it be that everyone in the world revolved around them? You stinking brat, if you dare to say another word, I will teach you a lesson today. The girl in the purple gold robe took a step forward and a peak of the 9 transformations of the divine soul spread out. Yi Guchen's expression did not change, but his heart was slightly surprised. At this age, the 9 transformations of the divine soul? Looking at the 7 forces, the heaven's favorites with the 9 transformations of the divine soul were at least 18 years old. There was no heaven's favorite at this age. And Yi Guchen had never heard of such a heaven's favorite in the 7 forces. Ziyun, don't be too rude. The handsome man on the side pretended to scold her. But there was no hint of blame in his tone. Yi Guchen's expression didn't change as he spoke. Could you remove the cover first? Seeing this, the handsome man smiled and said, Brother, I am Dongfang Hong, and this is my sister, Dongfang Ziyun. I see that you have the ability to shake the crystal cloud shield, so you must be extraordinary as well. Therefore, I have something to ask you. The man named Dongfang Hong said with a seemingly amiable smile. However, he still didn't remove the so-called crystal cloud cover. Yi Guchen could also see a trace of hidden contempt in Dongfang Hong's eyes. That was right. It was the kind of disdain that one would give to a lowly being like an ant. Dongfang Hong thought that he had concealed it well, but he couldn't escape Yi Guchen's eyes. I'm sorry, I've never heard of your names, nor do I know who you are. If there's nothing else, please let me go. Yi Guchen frowned slightly. If he used his full strength, it would be enough to break through the crystal cloud barrier. It was just that he didn't want to reveal his trump card in front of these two. But if he was really forced, Yi Guchen wouldn't care so much. Tch, you're really a frog at the bottom of a well. You've never even heard of the Dongfang family. Don't you know that the sun rises from the east? Dongfang Ziyun puffed out her small chest and looked at Yi Guchen with disdain, as if she was looking at a country bumpkin. However, with their background and experience, they did have the right to look down on Yi Guchen. The Dongfang family? Yi Guchen's expression was calm, but his heart was rippling slightly. Because the blood cloud puppet, blood prison sword, and sky demon general armor all came from the Baiming family. The Baiming family, the Dongfang family, and the 5 overlord families of the South Horizon region. Yi Guchen quickly connected the dots. Dongfang Ziyun was at the peak of the 9 transformations soul transformation at such a young age, and Dongfang Hong's strength made Yi Guchen feel threatened. He must be at the Life and Death Challenge realm. Such a young Life and Death Challenge realm expert could only be nurtured by the big forces of the South Sky region. Yi Guchen pondered in his heart. But in Dongfang Ziyun's eyes, this scene made him look like he was scared silly. She giggled and said, "Big brother, look, this brat is scared silly." "Ziyun, don't be rude." Although Dongfang Hong said this, there was a trace of contempt in his eyes. He paused for a moment, then said, "My sister and I have always liked to travel around, looking for dangerous places and opportunities. When we passed by the Saint Origin dynasty, we heard that there was a forbidden area called the Bottomless Demon Abyss in the Heaven Wasteland Plain. We were excited and came here." As expected, Yi Guchen's face was expressionless as he thought to himself. He was curious as to why people from big families of the South Sky region would come to the Saint Origin dynasty. However, Yi Guchen didn't completely believe them. He knew that in the eyes of these two, he was just a lowly character in a small dynasty. "Since you want to explore, then go ahead. What's the use of keeping me here?" Yi Guchen asked indifferently. "To be honest, I'm not familiar with the Bottomless Demon Abyss, so I hope you can lead the way for us." Dongfang Hong finally revealed his purpose. Lead the way for them? Yi Guchen looked at Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun. Who did they think they were to ask Yi Guchen to lead the way for them? Moreover, Yi Guchen knew that the so-called leading the way was just a pretense. To put it bluntly, they were using Yi Guchen as a shield to explore the way for them and bear the risk. They would stay behind and act according to the circumstances, looking for opportunities. Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun's attitude must have been the same when they were traveling around dangerous places, forcing others to lead the way. In the end, the ones who died were the others, while the siblings benefited. The Dongfang family. What a great reputation. Unfortunately, I don't know this so-called Dongfang family. Yi Guchen's tone was indifferent. "Oh, brother, I'm just being kind. After this is done, I can reward you with 100,000 crystal jades. How about it? Aren't you tempted by such a sum of money?" Dongfang Hong's tone also turned cold. He slowly took a step forward, and a faint pressure of life and death poured out. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed. With his current wealth, 100,000 crystal jades was nothing in his eyes. Dongfang Hong must have thought that Yi Guchen was a rogue cultivator or a disciple of a small family, so he would give him 100,000 crystal jades as charity. However, Yi Guchen deliberately took 2 steps back, pretending to be intimidated by the aura. His face turned pale. He knew that disciples of large families in the South Horizon region like these definitely had many life-saving treasures. Even if he used the blood cloud puppet, it would be difficult to deal with these two in a short time. Therefore, Yi Guchen could only resort to a strategy. Seeing Yi Guchen's pale face and taking a few steps back, Dongfang Ziyun sneered, "I already told you to behave yourself. You just had to make Big Brother angry." As she spoke, she looked at Dongfang Hong with admiration. As one of the dominating families in the South Horizon region, the Dongfang family produced countless geniuses. However, Dongfang Ziyun and Dongfang Hong were disciples of the Side family with low status. Among the Side family disciples, Dongfang Hong, who had reached the life and death threshold, was already in the top 3. This was why Dongfang Ziyun admired him so much. In Dongfang Ziyun's eyes, Yi Guchen didn't even have the right to carry Dongfang Hong's shoes. Therefore, Yi Guchen's indifferent attitude towards Dongfang Hong made Dongfang Ziyun very unhappy. "Brother, please." Dongfang Hong still had a smile on his face as he removed the crystal cloud barrier. However, he felt a chill in his heart. He had been a Side family disciple of the Dongfang family since young and had suffered all kinds of humiliation. It wasn't until he revealed his talent and reached the life and death threshold that the Dongfang family started to pay attention to him. Therefore, Dongfang Hong was slightly sick in his heart. He couldn't bear to see others looking down on him. In this small kingdom, Dongfang Hong was confident that he could do whatever he wanted. Even if he met experts, he just had to mention the Dongfang family's name and they would all treat him politely. However, this youth in front of him treated him with such an attitude. This made Dongfang Hong's heart turn cold. However, because he still needed Yi Guchen as a spy, Dongfang Hong didn't fall out with him. When Yi Guchen slowly walked towards the bottomless demon abyss, Dongfang Hong's smile suddenly froze. He turned his head and asked Dongfang Xian, "Xian, are you sure there's a great opportunity in the bottomless demon abyss?" "Yes, big brother, don't worry. The treasure-seeking mouse won't make a mistake." However, this treasure-seeking mouse seems to be afraid of the bottomless demon abyss, as if there's something terrifying there. Dongfang Xian took out a fist-sized golden mouse. This was a rare demonic beast called the treasure-seeking mouse. Only an overlord family like the Dongfang family could obtain such a rare demonic beast. "It's fine. No matter how dangerous it is, with that fellow in front of us, we'll just act according to the situation." Dongfang Hong sneered. Clearly, this wasn't the first time he had done this. "That's right. That stinking brat dares to talk back to Big Brother. He's really short-sighted. The ignorant are fearless." Dongfang Xian mocked. Therefore, he did not have to worry too much about the corrosion of death energy for the time being. The only thing Yi Guchen was worried about was what existed in the depths of the bottomless abyss. At the same time, Yi Guchen was secretly paying attention to Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Xian. When they entered the bottomless abyss, they were also surprised by the death qi. They couldn't help but release their true qi to protect themselves. Yi Guchen secretly gauged Dongfang Hong's battle strength. As for Dongfang Xian, Yi Guchen wouldn't have paid much attention to her if she didn't have some strange Dharma treasures. Yi Guchen had no fear as long as they didn't enter the life and death realm, even if they were at the peak of the 9 transformations. With his current strength, it would be difficult for him to find a match in the divine soul realm. What Yi Guchen cared about the most was Dongfang Hong's strength. Although they were all at the life and death realm, there were differences in strength. Opening the Qi Sea and Mind Sea, allowing them to connect and fuse with the body, was the life and death realm. The initial opening of the life and death realm was called the minor realm. When the Qi Sea and Mind Sea were completely connected and fused, it was called the grand realm. When Gu Xiaoyang, Jun Xiaoyao, and other top geniuses of the Nantian region broke through the life and death realm, they all directly opened the grand realm. People like them were the real geniuses. Dongfang Hong's true qi was vigorous, but it was slightly unstable. It was obvious that he had just broken through the life and death realm. Even in the small hidden entrances, it wasn't very stable. It was because of this that Dongfang Hong was only slightly valued by the Dongfang family. If he could completely open the life and death realm and achieve the grand realm in one go, even the Dongfang family would treat him seriously and nurture him as a martial arts genius. However, even if it was just the minor realm, his strength was far beyond the 9 transformations. Therefore, Yi Guchen didn't let his guard down. As time passed, Yi Guchen and the Dongfang siblings went deeper and deeper into the bottomless abyss. 500 feet, 700 feet, 10,000 feet. The place Yi Guchen went even deeper than the cave where he obtained the 5-colored golden core and the ancient jade of the 5 divine beasts. The qi of death here was extremely dense, and the corrosive power was also several times stronger. Even with Yi Guchen's golden true qi, it was still making sizzling sounds. It was very exhausting. Now, Yi Guchen was a little relieved. At this place, even a qi sea of 10,000 feet wouldn't be enough. Only a qi sea of 10,000 feet would be able to hold on. At the same time, he also noticed that the Dongfang siblings had already brought out 2 transparent light shields. It wasn't the crystal cloud shield that trapped Yi Guchen before, but a method used to isolate the qi of death. As expected of a big force. Such a protective treasure might not be found even in the 7 big forces, Yi Guchen thought to himself. Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Xian looked at each other in surprise. That kid's true qi is so dense? Dongfang Hong was astonished. Dongfang Xian's eyes lit up, and she said in a low voice, "Maybe that stinky kid has some secrets. After we explore this place, we can capture him and force him to tell us what secrets he's hiding." "Xian, you're really smart," Dongfang Hong praised. "I learned it from you, big brother." Dongfang Xian smiled with her eyes narrowed. Below the demonic abyss, Yi Guchen's lips curled up in a cold smile. The range of his divine soul was 200 feet, and with the chi of death here, Yiguchen's divine soul fluctuations were even more concealed. Therefore, Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Xiun didn't realize that their conversation had been heard by Yiguchen. "You're going too far." Yiguchen's eyes were as cold as swords. Dongfang Xiun looked delicate and beautiful, but her heart was so sinister. Moreover, she had already touched Yiguchen's bottom line. "If that's the case, then I will accompany you to the end." Yiguchen suddenly let go of the hand that was holding the cliff. His body fell into the depths like an arrow. Above, Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Xiun's expressions changed at the same time. They gritted their teeth and fell down together. 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet, 5,000 feet. In the end, Yiguchen didn't know how deep he had fallen, but he vaguely sensed the ground. He tapped the cliff again and landed steadily. As soon as his feet touched the ground, there was a series of cracking sounds. Yiguchen looked down and focused his eyes. The ground beneath his feet was covered in countless white bones. He looked at the bottom of the demonic abyss. As far as the eye could see, there were white bones everywhere. At the end of the endless white bones, a pitch-black demonic city stood there with an ancient and desolate aura. At the bottom of the demonic abyss, there was a land of white bones and an ancient demonic city. Chapter 370. The scene in front of him was shocking and frightening. The deepest part of the bottomless demon abyss seemed to have been hollowed out. Countless white bones covered the white land. On the ground, there was a dark demon city that seemed to have been standing since ancient times, with a primitive and barbaric aura. In the bottomless demon abyss, the surging deathly aura that could devour life came from the demon city. Danger! Extreme danger! Yiguchen's eyes were filled with shock. He was a cold and indifferent person, and he did not know what fear was. However, the demon city in front of him gave him a sense of extreme danger. This sense of danger surpassed all the dangers that Yiguchen had encountered before. It was as if there was a taboo in the demon city. At this moment, Yiguchen suddenly realized that the immemorial sword token in his origin ring had a reaction and started to tremble slightly. Immemorial sword token, could it be? Yiguchen's face suddenly froze and an intense light burst out from his eyes. With his personality, it was rare for him to be agitated or lose his composure. However, Yiguchen was unable to calm down. This was because he knew that the immemorial sword token was closely related to the famed immemorial swords. In the immemorial sword record, there were 108 divine swords on the heaven and earth lists. They were the strongest divine weapons in the world. Above the South Sky region, the Celestial Emperor Sword, which was ranked 14th on the heaven list, had replaced the blazing sun and bright moon to illuminate the land. A sword that could illuminate the vast land showed how powerful it was. Even if it was a famed sword on the earth list, even if it was slightly weaker than the famed sword on the heaven list, it was still a rare and precious divine weapon. It could be said that the famed immemorial swords were rare. Although mysterious fires and mysterious thunders were rare, they were nothing compared to the famed immemorial swords. Their value was not on the same level. The famed immemorial swords were priceless. Although my ambition is to create a famed sword that belongs to me, I will have no regrets if I can obtain a famed immemorial sword, Yiguchen thought to himself. A famed ancient sword was the ultimate dream of all sword cultivators. Yiguchen was no exception. It could be said that if this news were to spread out, the entire South Horizon region would be in an uproar. None of the top forces would be able to sit still. Could it be that the primordial sword is in this demon city? But I only have one primordial sword token. The Sidhu family has 2 primordial sword tokens. The other one was taken away by Prince Yuani, Yiguchen thought to himself. Clearly, there were more than just these few immemorial sword tokens. Yiguchen only had one on him. Although there was a reaction now, it obviously wouldn't change anything. Didi, I didn't expect there to be such a magnificent demon city in the bottomless demon abyss. Dongfang Hong's voice came from behind. Dongfang Xiun's face was also filled with shock as she looked at the shocking scene in front of her. However, she turned to look at Yiguchen and crossed her arms in front of her chest. She pouted and looked at Yi Guchen playfully. "Stinking brat, you sure run fast," said Dongfang Ziyun. A dark light flashed in Yi Guchen's eyes. Fortunately, the Dongfang siblings didn't have any immemorial sword tokens. Otherwise, if they sensed the strange reaction of the immemorial sword token, they would suspect that this demon city was related to the primordial sword. "Ziyun, what are you talking about? I don't think this brother wants to run away. He's in a hurry to show us the way." Dongfang Hong laughed. He was in a good mood to be able to find such a secret place. However, his words seemed to be hinting at something. Obviously, the deeper meaning was to tell Yi Guchen to be honest and not play any tricks. Yi Guchen didn't say anything. His expression was calm. Seeing this, Dongfang Hong directly said, "Brother, please lead the way into the city." The Eternal Devil City was filled with an aura of death. Even though it was a mysterious place, anyone who laid eyes on it would think that it was a place of great danger. Therefore, Dongfang Hong asked Yi Guchen to lead the way. Yi Guchen looked at Dongfang Hong deeply and didn't say anything. He slowly walked into the demon city. Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun followed behind. The closer they got to the demon city, the stronger the death qi became. Even a divine dwelling expert wouldn't be able to withstand it for too long. Even the qi shield released by Yi Guchen's qi si was extremely unstable. From time to time, the death qi would corrode the shield and directly invade it. Fortunately, Yi Guchen had the Thunder Tribulation Sword in his body, which could eliminate the death qi. As for Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun, their protective light shield was obviously a rare treasure of the Dongfang family. Although it had dimmed a lot under the suppression of the death qi, it could still hold on for a while. "Well, this is..." Yi Guchen suddenly looked down. Among the eerie white bones, a broken halberd was flashing. Just as he was about to reach out to examine it, a ray of qi shot directly to the ground. Yi Guchen's hand paused. "Brother, wait a moment. Let me take a look at it." Dongfang Hong stepped forward with a smile and picked up the broken halberd. After taking a closer look, he instantly revealed a look of surprise. "This material is a rare treasure, golden jade." Dongfang Hong's face lit up with joy. Although the broken halberd couldn't be used, it was made of the rare golden jade, which could be melted down and reforged. Yi Guchen didn't say anything and continued walking forward. A few moments later, Yi Guchen found another broken weapon. "Brat, don't touch it." Dongfang Ziyun ignored Yi Guchen and picked up the weapon. "It's also a rare material." Dongfang Ziyun's face was filled with a happy smile. It was obvious that these weapons were left behind by experts who had died here. Therefore, none of them were ordinary. Although they were all broken, the value of the materials was extremely high. Next, Yi Guchen found a few more weapons. Although Yi Guchen was the first to discover these weapons, Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun stepped forward and collected them with smiles on their faces. Even in the Dongfang family, it would take a lot of wealth to obtain these rare materials. Moreover, this was only the outskirts of the demon city. They hadn't truly entered the demon city. In the face of the Dongfang siblings' forceful looting, Yi Guchen's expression was cold and he didn't say anything. After a while, Yi Guchen really did approach the demon city. The closer he got, the more Yi Guchen felt the demon city's aura. It was like the aura of a primordial beast. Endless pitch-black death qi surged out of the demon city. At this place, if Yi Guchen didn't have the lightning tribulation sword in his body, he would have been completely devoured by the death qi in an instant. Even Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun's protective barrier dimmed and wouldn't be able to hold on for too long. But looking at the excitement in Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun's eyes, it was obvious that they wouldn't stop here. Yes, in front is... Yi Guchen looked over. To his surprise, he discovered that there were many figures standing stiffly outside the Devil City. Those figures didn't have the slightest bit of vitality, and their skin was deathly gray. But the faint remnant aura made Yi Guchen's face freeze. Evidently, these were all experts of the past who had ultimately fallen here. He thought of the living corpse with the 5-colored golden core. The figures in front of him were obviously devoured by the death qi like that living corpse. And Yi Guchen knew that if he got too close and provoked these living corpses, they would attack him directly. Yiguchen thought to himself and stopped in his tracks. Dong Fanghong saw this and said with a smile, "Brother, why did you stop?" "We can't go any further. I'm afraid it's dangerous," Yiguchen said. "Oh, I don't see any danger." Dong Fanghong's tone turned cold. "You don't see those figures?" Yiguchen frowned slightly. If those living corpses were provoked, Yiguchen and the others wouldn't be able to resist their strength. "It's just some dead corpses." "Brother, don't tell me you're afraid of that?" Dong Fanghong's tone was slightly impatient. "Just go when I tell you to go. Why are you talking so much nonsense?" Dongfang Ziyun didn't hold back at all. Yiguchen's expression didn't change. He walked forward and thought of a solution. When Yiguchen was only 100 feet away from the living corpses, his sole perception vaguely sensed that some of the living corpses seemed to tremble slightly. Yiguchen's footsteps suddenly stopped, and then he rushed to the other side. The Dongfang siblings' expressions changed. Just as they were about to attack, they saw that the originally motionless living corpses woke up one by one. They let out hoarse roars and rushed toward Yiguchen and the Dongfang siblings. Chapter 371. The Dongfang siblings' expressions changed drastically when they saw the living corpses charging at them. Yiguchen had experienced this kind of thing before, so it was within his expectations. However, the Dongfang siblings were not aware of this. "Damn it! You knew about this." Dongfang Hong was so angry that he did not try to hide his anger anymore. His tone was as cold as ice. "I told you to stop, but you didn't listen. Now that the living corpses have been stirred up, who's to blame?" Yiguchen said coldly, his eyes as cold as ice. Without hesitation, he dashed toward the periphery. Putting aside the fact that there were no traces of the primordial sword in the ancient demon city, Yiguchen was not allowed to investigate in this dangerous situation. The only thing that caught Yiguchen's attention was that the primordial sword token in his origin ring was vibrating. "Do you think you can escape? You've offended the Dongfang family. Even if you were the crown prince of this dynasty, I could kill you at will, let alone a divine soul realm martial cultivator." Seeing that he had been fooled by Yiguchen, Dongfang Hong no longer tried to hide his feelings. His tone was cold and arrogant as he judged Yiguchen's life and death. At the same time, he and Dongfang Ziyun retreated quickly, hoping to leave this place first. Who's the one killing who?" Yiguchen's eyes flashed. He took out the Xianming heavy sword and slashed it horizontally. A fierce thousand-layers sword wave spread out with a loud bang. With Yiguchen as the center, the white bones on the ground were crushed into powder by the shockwave. The shockwave continued to blast toward Dongfang Hong and the others. "How dare you be so presumptuous in front of me, a mere divine soul realm martial cultivator?" Dongfang Hong threw out his palm. His terrifying genuine qi turned into a palm print and destroyed the sword wave. Then, Dongfang Hong took out the crystal cloud shield again and tried to envelop Yiguchen. Previously, Yiguchen was trapped by the crystal cloud cover, so Dongfang Hong was confident that he could trap Yiguchen. Then he would use Yiguchen to stall the living corpses, allowing him and Dongfang Ziyun to escape. "Are you going to use this move again?" Yiguchen smiled coldly. He directly activated the vermilion bird totem on his chest. The power of the flame totem was directly transmitted to Yiguchen's back. Then, a pair of incomparably gorgeous fire wings suddenly spread out. Yiguchen flapped his wings and shot out like an arrow, dodging the crystal cloud cover. Hidden gate of life and death. Seeing the fire wings on Yiguchen's back, Dongfang Ziyun instinctively screamed. "No, that should be some kind of secret technique. This brat really knows how to hide his strength." Dongfang Hong's face turned slightly ugly. However, he could not let Yiguchen leave just like that. Divine Violet Sun Palm. Dongfang Hong's cultivation of the small mortal gate erupted. Boundless true qi surged out and turned into a giant purple hand, suppressing Yiguchen in front of him. The Divine Violet Sun Palm was a king-level martial art of the Dongfang family. Using it with Dongfang Hong's cultivation, its power was not to be underestimated. Even Yiguchen's expression changed slightly. That giant purple hand seemed to have the ability to lock down and suppress, slowing down Yiguchen quite a bit. "You'll die here," Dongfang Hong sneered. The true qi wings on his back unfolded. Then he hugged Dongfang Ziyun's waist and directly overtook Yiguchen. However, at this critical moment, he did not have the time to personally kill Yiguchen. Behind them, more than 10 living corpses rushed over. Their aura was terrifying. One could imagine that these living corpses were supreme experts when they were alive. After they died, they were transformed into powerful demonic corpse puppets by the death qi. Yiguchen used the Xianming heavy sword and the boundless heaven sword art to defeat the giant purple hand. However, the demonic corpse puppets had already rushed over. Yiguchen's expression turned serious. The demonic corpse puppets from before had almost killed Yiguchen. Now, more than 10 demonic corpse puppets were surrounding Yiguchen. Even if Yiguchen wanted to use the power of the lightning tribulation sword, he could not deal with more than 10 demonic corpse puppets at the same time. "Big brother, that brat is finished." Not far ahead, Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun looked back and sneered when they saw Yiguchen surrounded by the demonic corpse puppets. They did not feel the slightest bit of guilt or pity. This was what they did when they entered any secret place before. They forced the ordinary warriors to explore the way. Even if they died, they did not feel anything. It was as if those people's lives were not lives. Only the lives of the two of them were the most precious. This brat knew the situation here and pretended not to know. "This is the price he has to pay," Dongfang Hong said coldly. "I'm afraid this brat is already regretting it." Dongfang Ziyun giggled. On the other side, Yiguchen, who was surrounded by the demonic corpse puppets, was facing a life-and-death crisis. Suddenly, an idea flashed through his mind. Without hesitation, Yiguchen took out the pitch-black immemorial sword token from his origin ring. Yiguchen held the immemorial sword token and stared at the demonic corpse puppets around him. The immemorial sword token was still trembling, as if it had some kind of connection with the eternal demon city. At this moment, a roar suddenly came from the eternal demon city. The roar seemed to have come from the primordial times and shook the entire land of bones. Even Yiguchen's sea of consciousness was trembling violently, as if it could not withstand the roar. After the roar, the demonic corpse puppets glanced at Yiguchen with their dead gray eyes, then turned and charged toward Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun. This scene made Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun, who were watching from a distance, turn pale instantly. It was as if they had seen a ghost. "How is this possible?" Dongfang Hong shouted, his face pale. He had thought that Yiguchen would be killed by the demonic corpse puppets, but now that Yiguchen was fine, the demonic corpse puppets were chasing after them. "Damn it, this brat must have been here. The token in his hand must be some kind of token. He has been playing with us." Dongfang Ziyun's face was red with anger, her chest heaving up and down. In their eyes, Yiguchen obviously knew the situation here, but he pretended not to know and framed them. However, Yiguchen had never taken the initiative to frame the Dongfang siblings. They had gone too far and touched Yiguchen's bottom line. But now, the situation had reversed. "Let's go!" Dongfang Hong hugged Dongfang Ziyun and desperately wanted to escape. He knew that although he had the cultivation of the minor profound martial realm, he wouldn't be able to last more than a few rounds against the demonic corpse puppets. "You want to leave now?" Yiguchen's lips curled into a playful smile. The Dongfang siblings had repeatedly touched his bottom line, and had even secretly decided to force out his secrets. How could Yiguchen let such people go? In the next moment, Yiguchen took out the blood prison sword and heavenly demon general armor. The blood-red armor wrapped Yiguchen's body tightly, and the malevolent thorns that extended out made Yiguchen's figure appear even colder and more austere. He held the blood prison sword in his hand and flapped the vermilion bird wings on his back as he charged toward the Dongfang siblings. Not far away, Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun felt Yiguchen's change and turned back to look. Their eyes instantly froze. "Damn it, you're actually from the Baiming family." Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun's eyes were filled with shock as they roared. Chapter 372. The Blood Prison Sword and Sky Demon General Armor were both products of the Baiming family. The Dongfang family and the Baiming family had a feud. As the saying went, know thyself and know thy enemy. Both families had a good understanding of their opponents. That was why Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun could recognize Yi Guqin's Blood Prison Sword and Sky Demon General Armor at a glance. Damn it, no wonder you're so vicious and set us up. Even in the Baiming family, only the core members of the family can obtain the Blood Prison Sword and Sky Demon General Armor. For you, Dongfang Hong roared as he ran for his life. If he had faced Yi Guqin alone, he would not have run. He would have even killed Yi Guqin along the way to obtain the family's merits. Yi Guqin must be a core member of the Baiming family who possessed these two divine weapons. He must have a high status. If he could kill such a member of the family, it would be a great contribution. Even the direct descendants of the family would look at Dongfang Hong differently because of this. But with more than 10 demonic corpse puppets chasing after him, Dongfang Hong had no chance at all. I don't believe that the Baiming family will stay here forever. Once I escape, I'll wait outside and kill this person. Dongfang Hong thought to himself as he exchanged glances with Dongfang Ziyun. The two of them understood each other and had a tacit understanding. Yi Guqin, who was behind them, did not know about this. However, from Dongfang Hong's furious tone, he could guess that the Dongfang family and the Baiming family, these two hegemonic families, seemed to be in a hostile relationship. Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun clearly misunderstood him and thought that Yi Guqin was a member of the Baiming family. They also thought that everything before them was Yi Guqin's scheme against them. But Yi Guqin did not care about this. Whether or not they misunderstood, this enmity had already been formed and there was no way to resolve it. I have to make them stay. Yi Guqin's eyes were cold. He poured his true qi into the Blood Prison Sword. In a split second, the originally cracked and dim Blood Prison Sword exploded with a sharp sword light that sent chills down one's spine. God-slaying sword technique, Yellow Springs. Yi Guqin slashed out with his sword, and a terrifying sword qi transformed into a blood-red sword river that surged toward the Dongfang siblings. His sword wasn't meant to kill the Dongfang siblings. After all, Dongfang Hong was in the minor profound martial realm, so it wouldn't be easy for him to kill him. What Yi Guqin wanted was to block the attack. Delay Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun, then let the demonic corpse puppets kill them. This is the god-slaying sword technique. The Baiming clan is indeed treacherous. Dongfang Hongjian sensed the sword river coming from behind him. He turned around and struck out with his palm, destroying the sword river. Originally, they had misunderstood Yi Guqin, but after Yi Guqin displayed the god-killing sword technique, they were even more convinced of Yi Guqin's identity. This was because the god-slaying sword technique was the king-level sword technique of the Baiming family. However, although Dongfang Hong blocked Yi Guqin's sword with his palm, his speed was slowed down a little. The demonic corpse puppet behind him was almost catching up with him. However, Yi Guqin's expression was indifferent as he continued to attack. He also realized that the Blood Prison Sword had a slight effect on the god-slaying sword technique. But when he thought about the possibility that the god-slaying sword technique was also a sword technique of the Baiming clan, Yi Guqin felt relieved. Damn it! Dongfang Hong's face was ashen, and he was so angry that his heart was about to explode. Originally, with his cultivation and strength, he didn't need to expend much effort to deal with Yi Guqin. But in this situation he could only passively defend. He didn't dare to stop to deal with Yi Guqin. Damn it, when I escape, I'll cut you into 1,000 pieces. Dongfang Hong was furious. Dongfang Hong could only watch as Yi Guqin attacked him without being able to retaliate. This made him feel extremely aggrieved. It was as disgusting as eating a fly. You didn't care about my life at all before. Now that your own life is threatened, you're flustered and exasperated? Yi Guqin's voice was as cold as water. The sea of qi in his body expanded, and his true qi surged into the Blood Prison Sword. Yi Guqin activated the Blood Spirit Array and displayed the fifth form of the god-slaying sword technique, Yama. Boom! The blood-red figure of Yama rose from behind Yi Guqin, and a terrifying murderous aura surged out. You actually mastered the 5th form of the god-slaying sword technique. Do you know that move? Dongfang Hong's eyes suddenly showed a trace of fear. There were many king-level sword principles in the Baiming family. 2 of them could be used in combination. The power of the combined sword technique was comparable to an emperor-level sword technique. The god-slaying sword technique was one of the 2 sword techniques that could be combined. The requirement was that one had to at least master the 5th form. That was why Dongfang Hong was so shocked when he saw Yi Guchen display Yama. If Yi Guchen had really displayed the emperor-level sword technique, even with Dongfang Hong's cultivation, he might have been seriously injured or even killed. What is he saying? Yi Guchen frowned slightly. He was not a member of the Baiming clan, so he naturally did not know the reason. However, Yi Guchen was very smart. From Dongfang Hong's words, he could tell that the god-slaying sword technique seemed to be hiding some secrets. However, at this juncture, Yi Guchen did not have the luxury of time to think too much. He directly attacked with his sword. With the enhancement of the blood spirit array, the sword was extremely powerful. The terrifying blood-red sword radiance, which was dozens of feet long, slashed toward Dongfang Hong as if it could split the sky. Dongfang Hong's expression changed abruptly. He immediately took out a life-saving treasure to block Yi Guchen's powerful sword. This was because he did not have the time to block Yi Guchen's sword. Then, Yi Guchen continued to attack with his sword. In order to escape, Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun could only take out their treasures to block Yi Guchen's attacks. Dongfang Hong's face was as black as the bottom of a pot, and the veins on his temples were throbbing. Dongfang Ziyun's face was even more ghastly. She cried, "Brother, I almost lost all my treasures." The Dongfang siblings were extremely angry. Although the materials they had taken from Yi Guchen were precious, they could not compare to the treasures they had just taken out. This time, they had suffered a double loss. Behind them, the demonic corpse puppet finally caught up. It threw out a punch, and the fierce fist wind almost tore the space apart as it charged toward the Dongfang siblings. Boom! Dongfang Hong once again took out his last life-saving treasure. His origin ring was now empty. He had already thrown out most of his life-saving treasures. However, they were almost at the cliff. As long as they climbed up, they would be able to shake off the demonic corpse puppet's attacks. We're finally about to escape. When the time comes, I'll definitely contact my clansmen and have you, a member of the Dark North clan, executed. Dongfang Hong's tone was filled with hatred. Behind them, Yi Guchen's expression was as cold as ice. His energy sea spun rapidly. Terrifying sword chi gushed out from his back, transforming into a pair of sword wings that were dozens of feet long. 10,000 God tribulation, destruction of heaven and earth. Yi Guchen slashed out with his sword. Violent sword chi surged like a river for thousands of miles. The majestic sword chi instantly condensed into a point and shot toward Dongfang Hong and Dongfang Ziyun. No! Dongfang Hong's eyes finally revealed a look of terror. Even Dongfang Hong, who was born in the Dongfang family, was extremely shocked in the face of a supreme sword technique like the 10,000 God tribulation. He had already taken out all his life-saving treasures. If he did not attack, he would be hit by the sword. If he attacked, he would be delayed and surrounded by the demonic corpse puppets. Either way, he would be dead. In the next moment, Dongfang Hong's gaze suddenly fell on Dongfang Ziyun. Just as he was struggling with a decision, Dongfang Ziyun gritted her teeth. Dongfang Ziyun suddenly gritted her teeth. Vigorous true chi poured into her white jade-like palm and fiercely slapped towards Dongfang Hong's chest. "Sorry, brother." Dongfang Ziyun's eyes were cold. Chapter 373. Bang. Although Dongfang Ziyun's cultivation hadn't reached the life and death chamber, she had poured all of her true chi into this attack. She was caught off guard and hit Dongfang Hong's chest. Dongfang Hong, who was at the life and death chamber, spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards. Dongfang Ziyun took the opportunity to break free from Dongfang Hong's embrace and dashed forward. Zin. Dongfang Hong's eyes were filled with shock, disbelief, confusion, anger, and many other emotions. I learned all of this from you, big brother. Dongfang Ziyun glanced at Dongfang Hong one last time, then took out a talisman paper from her origin ring and stuck it on her body. In the next moment, the talisman paper shone brightly, and Dongfang Ziyun's speed increased tenfold. You actually have another wind walk talisman? Dongfang Hong laughed bitterly, his eyes full of regret. Just now, the thought of sacrificing Dongfang Ziyun flashed across his mind. However, he hesitated and couldn't do it. In his eyes, he thought Dongfang Ziyun was sincere towards him. In the next moment, he was sacrificed by Dongfang Ziyun. Not only that, Dongfang Ziyun had secretly left a wind walk talisman behind. She didn't use it to escape, as she was afraid that Dongfang Hong would take it away. She wanted to use it at a critical moment. As for the so-called sibling relationship, it was fake. They weren't blood-related siblings but only cousins. In a few breaths' time, the demonic corpse puppets had caught up and punched at him. Dongfang Hong couldn't resist at all. He screamed as his body was penetrated by the demonic corpse puppets' fists, creating dozens of bloody holes. His entire body was like a sieve, bleeding non-stop. Damn it, I'm the pride of the Dongfang family. To think that I'll die here? Dongfang Hong's mouth kept bleeding, his eyes full of regret. Unfortunately, it was too late to mend the pen after the sheep was lost. Yiguchen didn't show any mercy when he saw this. He directly charged at Dongfang Hong with the blood hell sword in hand. Dongfang Hong saw this and roared, "Sinister Biming family, if you kill me, the Dongfang family will hunt you down to the ends of the earth." Yiguchen was unperturbed. He was least afraid of threats. The sharp blood-red sword Qi tore Dongfang Hong's body apart. The blood mist was absorbed by the blood hell sword and the heavenly demon general armor, and the blood-red light on the surface became even thicker. The blood spirit spell formation was immediately activated and began to absorb the blood Qi to slowly repair the two divine weapons. An expert of the minor Xian Gate would have an incomparably dense life force, which would be of great help to the repair of the two divine weapons. Dongfang Ziyun escaped. Yiguchen frowned slightly. His soul could reach a range of 600 meters, but he was unable to sense Dongfang Ziyun's presence within that range. It was clear that Dongfang Ziyun had already fled far away. With her windwalk talisman, she was most likely heading for the exit of the bottomless devil abyss. Yiguchen's eyes flashed. He didn't choose to chase after Dongfang Ziyun. Instead, he went to find the crystal cloud barrier. After Dongfang Hong's death, the crystal cloud cover became an ownerless item. Yiguchen had used his blood essence to refine the crystal cloud cover into his own treasure. Although the crystal cloud cover didn't have any offensive capabilities, it could be used to restrain enemies or protect oneself. Even ordinary life and death chamber experts might not be able to shatter the crystal cloud cover in a short period of time. Yiguchen was confident that he could shatter it because he had mastered the 10,000 God Tribulation and Heaven Annihilation. After putting away the crystal cloud cover, Yiguchen glanced at the eternal Devil City. He didn't hesitate and directly left. The current him didn't have the ability to explore the secrets of this place. Moreover, Yiguchen couldn't guarantee that the immemorial sword token would be able to protect him forever. Moreover, Yiguchen guessed that if he wanted to know the secrets of this place, the most basic requirement was to collect all the immemorial sword tokens. After thinking for a while, Yiguchen directly left the bottomless devil abyss. He would come back to explore the secrets of this place when he had the ability in the future. Not long after, Yiguchen walked out of the bottomless devil abyss. Seeing the light of day again, Yiguchen let out a sigh of relief. The episode this time could be said to be a little thrilling. If he didn't have the immemorial sword token, Yiguchen shook his head slightly and stopped thinking about it. However, what made him frown was that there was no trace of Dongfang Ziyun leaving. Yiguchen couldn't even determine which direction Dongfang Ziyun had fled in. Clearly, Dongfang Ziyun was very careful and didn't leave any trace behind. Yiguchen's eyes were deep. It seemed that even he had misjudged her. That seemingly arrogant girl was actually ruthless and scheming, far surpassing Dongfang Hong. Dongfang Ziyun's escape is a hidden danger. Fortunately, she mistakenly thought that I was from the Biming family, so she shouldn't target the Saint Origin dynasty for now. Moreover, she doesn't know my name. Yi Guchen thought. Although Dongfang Ziyun had escaped with her life, Yi Guchen didn't have to worry too much about the Dongfang family's revenge in the short term. If it was delayed, Yi Guchen might not even be in the Saint Origin dynasty. Therefore, Yi Guchen didn't worry too much. He directly left the bottomless devil abyss, found the azure sky eagle waiting outside, and set off for the great desolate mansion. At the same time, hundreds of miles away from the bottomless devil abyss, Dongfang Ziyun, who was wearing a purple gold robe, stopped and panted. The wind-walk talisman on her body had also turned to dust. It was obviously a one-time use treasure. Damn it. It wasn't easy to find Dongfang Hong and follow him to search for treasures. Compared to the side family, my progress was much faster. But now, it's all ruined by that stinking brat. Dongfang Ziyun's eyes were cold. Her respect and admiration for Dongfang Hong was just an act. With her status, she had to rely on someone with a higher cultivation base and status. As one of the top 3 prodigies in the Dongfang family's side family, Dongfang Hong naturally had the right to rely on Dongfang Ziyun. Dongfang Ziyun had already known that Dongfang Hong intended to sacrifice her, but she was hesitant. Dongfang Ziyun decided to make the first move to gain a chance of survival for herself. Big brother, don't blame me. I've learned a lot from you. But don't worry, I won't let that stinking brat go. Dongfang Ziyun's beautiful eyes flashed with a sinister light. She decided to spread the news to the Dongfang family's main branch. Although she had indirectly killed Dongfang Hong, she could push the blame to the Baiming family. At the same time, Dongfang Ziyun planned to contact the strongest prodigy in the side family, Dongfang Shuri. No matter what, Dongfang Hong was still one of the top 3 prodigies in the side family. As the top prodigy, Dongfang Shuri definitely wouldn't just stand by and watch. If I spread the news to the main branch, I'll be rewarded. Then, I'll tell Dongfang Shuri that I can build a relationship with him. His talent and resources are much better than Dongfang Hong's. Dongfang Ziyun smiled faintly. Although she had suffered a setback this time, it was a blessing in disguise. With Dongfang Shuri's temper, he'll definitely come to the Saint Origin dynasty. His talent and strength aren't any weaker than those prodigies in the main branch. I've already memorized the appearance of that Baiming family member. As long as I search carefully, he won't be able to escape. At that time, I'll be able to get a share of the credit and rise to the top. When Dongfang Shuri comes, that Baiming family member will definitely die. Then, even if Dongfang Shuri can't deal with him, he'll die in that person's hands, which will naturally anger the main branch. At that time, I'll be able to use this opportunity to build a relationship with the main branch. In the end, I'll still be the one who benefits. Dongfang Ziyun's thoughts were meticulous. With a deep smile on her face, she had thought of many follow-up plans. She came from a humble background and was considered to be at the bottom of the Dongfang family's side family. She had always relied on disguises and schemes to reach her current position. Naturally, she wouldn't miss the opportunity in front of her. In her eyes, Yi Guchen was just a person who was going to die for her plan to rise to the top. Chapter 374. Yi Guchen, who had left the Tianhuang Plains on the Green Sky Eagle, naturally did not know about Dongfang Ziyun's plan. However, Dongfang Ziyun didn't know about his talent and strength. What Dongfang Ziyun did not know was that the enemy he was facing was not an ordinary youth, but a peerless sword cultivator who possessed monstrous cultivation talent and an indifferent and cold temperament. Thus, the person she should be wary of wasn't Yi Guchen. It was Dongfang Ziyun. Unfortunately, Dongfang Ziyun didn't know how terrifying Yi Guchen was. That was why she was so confident that she could use Yi Guchen as a pawn in her plan. Yi Guchen didn't worry about the Dongfang family's threat, but he didn't worry too much. Because there were more important things to do right now. Northern Liang City. Sitting cross-legged on the back of the blue sky eagle, Yi Guchen gazed into the distance. While Yi Guchen was rushing to the Great Desolation Mansion. Outside the Saint Origin dynasty, in the middle of a barren mountain range. Lotus Village, Sword Heart Spring. This place was filled with sword-type Taoist rhymes all year round. In the clear spring waterfall, A young girl in a green dress was immersed in the spring water. She was like a lotus flower emerging from clear water. Even though she was in a deep coma, she was still like a beautiful painting under the contrast of the surrounding natural scenery, making people linger. The girl in the azure dress was the unconscious Su Jianshi. Two girls stood next to Su Jianshi, one on the left and one on the right. They were holding Su Jianshi's cold hands. One of the girls wore a simple cloth dress. It was Su Qiqiao. The other girl wore a light gauze dress. She had silver hair and watery eyes. It was Shui. However, at this moment, there was a trace of worry on the faces of the two girls. Big Sister Su's aura is weaker than before. Shui-er's eyes were covered with a layer of mist. She pouted as if she was about to cry. Don't cry. Didn't you say to trust your big brother? He'll definitely get the Saint Herb and save Big Sister Su Jianshi, Su Qiqiao comforted. Not far from them was a black-clothed young man with deep facial features. He stood there silently and stared at Su Jianshi, who was immersed in the spring water. His brows were tightly knitted like an iron lock. The black-clothed youth was Su Jianshi's older brother, Su Moyan. Two figures had appeared outside the Sword Heart Spring. One wore a hemp robe and had a beard. The other had a muscular body and carried a large hammer on his back. They were the two divine palace experts of Lotus Village, Village Chief Long Yuan and Gui Fu. Moyan. Long Yuan wanted to say something. Sister's situation is getting worse. I knew that Yiguchen. He died in the Void's Sword Realm. Suza's voices. Long Yuan's and Fu's smiled. Although the village was secluded, S's wasn't. S was T's voices and T's. They didn't tell Shui and Su Qiqiao about Yiguchen's death because they were concerned about their children's feelings. But Su Moyan couldn't accept the news. His heart was cold. Back then, he even swore that he would find the sacred medicine for my little sister. In the end, he even lost his own life. I really don't know how my little sister fell in love with this kind of person. If it was in the past, this kind of person wouldn't even be able to enter the doors of my Su family. The Su family. As Su Moyan spoke, his tone suddenly paused, as if he had touched upon some bad memory, causing his face to darken. Dragon Abyss Village Chief and Ghost Hatchet looked at each other in silence. Su Moyan took a deep breath and said firmly, "Please allow me to leave the village." "What if I don't agree?" Long Yuan said helplessly. "I still have to go," said Su Moyan. He could sense that Su Jianshi's aura was getting weaker and weaker. Even Long Yuan was a little worried. He felt that he was being too optimistic when he said that she could hold on for a year. Now, it seemed that Su Jianshi could hold on for a few more months. "Moyan, you have to be careful." Long Yuan finally sighed. "Village Chief, Uncle Fu Gui, farewell." Su Moyan cupped his hands and left the Sword Heart Spring. His aura suddenly erupted. He was at the peak of the Divine Soul 9 transformations. His cultivation wasn't any weaker than Xian Hao and the other top prodigies of the 7 major factions. Boom! A rumble spread out. A pair of pitch-black eagle wings appeared behind Su Moyan's back. These weren't true chi wings formed by the life and death threshold. They were manifested through a secret technique. Su Moyan flapped his eagle wings and flew out of Lotus Village like a black arrow. Long Yuan and Fu Gui sighed inwardly as they watched Su Moyan's departing figure. If that incident hadn't happened to the Su family, perhaps the young master's strength would be enough to compete with those prodigies of the South Horizon region. Long Yuan sighed. That's fate. Fu Gui also shook his head. Then, his eyes flashed and he suddenly asked, "Long Yuan, do you think Yiguchen is really dead? Although I don't want to believe it, the news shouldn't be wrong. However, he is someone recognized by the Divine Condor, and the Divine Condor is that person's pet." Long Yuan's gaze suddenly turned to another place. It was the back mountain of the village. It was the cliff with the cave that the Divine Condor had once guarded. Even with Long Yuan and Fu Gui's divine dwelling strength, when they looked at the cliff cave, their eyes were filled with boundless reverence and respect. It was as if the existence in the cave was the entire Lotus Village's faith and pillar. Putting aside Su Moyan, who had left Lotus Village for the great desolate mansion's 5 elemental land in search of sacred herbs. After several days of flying, Yiguchen finally arrived at the boundary of the Great Desolate Mansion. The Great Desolate Mansion was one of the 10 great mansions of the Saint Origin Empire. Because it was close to the 5 elemental land, and because it was constantly at war with the barbarian race, its population was far less than the other mansions. However, its per capita combat strength and valiance were higher than the other mansions. This was also the reason why the prodigies of the other mansions were very afraid of the prodigies of the Great Desolate Mansion in the past. This was because most of the prodigies of the Great Desolate Mansion had fought with the barbarian race before. They had rich combat experience and were shrewd and ruthless. They were far from the flowers of the other mansions. Not long after entering the Great Desolate Mansion, Yiguchen chose to settle down and sent the Green Sky Eagle back. This was because 1/3 of the hundreds of cities in the Great Desolate Mansion had already fallen into the hands of the barbarian race. The barbarian race was running rampant everywhere. Flying in the sky on the Green Sky Eagle was too conspicuous. It would be troublesome if he was discovered by the barbarian race. Therefore, Yiguchen chose to travel on foot. On one hand, it was safe and concealed. On the other hand, it was also a preliminary investigation of the barbarian race. However, after a day, Yiguchen suddenly discovered an awkward situation. He was lost. Yiguchen looked around. Most of the terrain of the Great Desolate Mansion was desolate desert or crimson sand plains. It was very difficult to determine the direction. I can't find anyone else for the time being. There's no way to find out the direction of northern Liang City. Yiguchen was dressed in a black robe and wore a bamboo hat on his head. A pitch-black veil hung down and covered half of his handsome face. Yiguchen knew that he was now a dead man. Since the Sword Sect Talon wanted to make him a secret trump card, Yiguchen would naturally not leak the news that he was still alive in advance. Moreover, it was possible that some of the enemies of the 7 great forces would know in advance, and it would be disadvantageous to him. Just as Yiguchen was thinking about how to get to northern Liang City, his footsteps suddenly came to a halt. His sharp spirit sensed that the ground was shaking slightly. Yiguchen looked around and saw that not far away, there was a group of people rushing over. There were a few figures riding Fergana horses and protecting a carriage in the middle. At the same time, Yiguchen's sharp senses picked up a faint smell of blood. His eyes narrowed slightly. This group of people was obviously not simply rushing over. Chapter 375. Yiguchen did not like trouble. However, Yiguchen could not tell the direction and the group of carriages seemed to know the way. Therefore, Yiguchen could only go forward and ask, "Who's there?" Just as Yiguchen walked forward, the carriage that had already rushed over suddenly stopped. The middle-aged man riding on the back of the Fergana horse in the lead looked at Yiguchen with a face full of vigilance. The middle-aged man's face was pale and his aura was weak. It was obvious that he had suffered serious injuries. "This is my first time in the Great Desolate Mansion and I lost my way. Can you tell me where northern Liang City is?" Yiguchen cupped his fists and asked, "You're going to northern Liang City too?" Seeing that Yiguchen did not seem to be from the barbarian tribe, the middle-aged man's tone softened. "Oh, could it be that you're going to northern Liang City too?" Yiguchen raised his eyebrows slightly. "Yes, but it's not convenient for us now." The middle-aged man forced a smile. "Are you being hunted down?" Yiguchen didn't beat around the bush. He spoke bluntly. The middle-aged man and the guards around him were slightly surprised. They did not expect the young man wearing a bamboo hat and black veil in front of them to be able to see through their current situation. "You're seriously injured and there's a smell of blood on you." "It's not hard to guess," Yiguchen said indifferently. "Little brother, since you know, I won't hide it from you. You can follow us, but if there's any danger, we can't guarantee your safety," the middle-aged man said with a wry smile. "Understood," Yiguchen nodded slightly. The reason why he was not afraid of such danger and trouble was because he could sense the middle-aged man's cultivation base. 9 changes of soul. Based on this, he could infer that the person who was chasing them should not be above the life and death threshold. Otherwise, this man would not be just seriously injured. As long as it was not a life and death threshold, Yiguchin was not afraid. But at this moment, the curtain of the carriage was suddenly lifted, and a sharp, ear-piercing voice rang out, "Husband, what are you doing? Hurry up and leave." Yiguchin glanced around and saw two figures sitting inside the carriage. One was a middle-aged woman, and the other was a pretty young girl. The middle-aged woman had a curvaceous figure and a charming face. However, the thick layer of makeup on her face made her look like a brothel keeper. As for the young girl, she seemed to be on the other end of the spectrum. She wore a long skirt with tassels, and her beautiful face was without any makeup. Her skin was white and beautiful, and she had a youthful appearance. She gave off a gentle and delicate feeling, as if she was a daughter of a noble family. "Madam, this little brother is lost. It just so happens that he's also heading to northern Liang City. Let's bring him along," said the middle-aged man. "What? The situation is already like this, and you're still being kind? What's the use of bringing a burden along?" the middle-aged woman said sarcastically again. She seemed to think that bringing Yiguchin along would slow them down. "Madam, if we leave him here, won't we be sending the barbarian tribe to their deaths?" The middle-aged man had an upright character. He seemed to be unwilling to see Yiguchin die here. "You can rest assured. I have some ability to protect myself," Yiguchin said. He did not mind the middle-aged woman's harshness. After all, they had no obligation to bring Yiguchin along. "I'm sorry, little brother. Come with us. You'll drive the carriage in front. However, if you encounter any danger, there's nothing we can do," the middle-aged man said apologetically. "Thank you. If there's a need, I'll definitely help," Yiguchin said. He had a good impression of this straightforward middle-aged man. Oh, a young man's tone is not small. It's good that he won't be a burden. Seeing that the middle-aged man insisted on bringing Yiguchin along, the middle-aged woman curled her lips in disdain. Although Yiguchin was wearing a bamboo hat and a black veil covering his face, his voice was that of a young man's. Therefore, the woman did not think that a young man's cultivation could be strong. However, the delicate girl in the carriage looked curiously at Yiguchin. Then, Yiguchin drove the carriage. The middle-aged man and several guards surrounded the carriage and moved forward. About half an hour after they left, a group of figures riding black wildebeests arrived. There were about a dozen people in this group. Each of them was tall and strong. Their bodies were as strong as bulls. The leather armor they wore could not hide their strong muscles. They were a group of barbarian tribe people. The few people in the lead were 7 feet tall. Their bodies were branded with blood-red totems. Although the pictures of the totems were different, the scarlet color caused one's heart to tremble with fear at a glance. Some of the barbarian tribe people in the rear looked at the people in the lead with reverence in their eyes. They were just ordinary barbarian tribe soldiers. However, the people in the lead were totem warriors of higher status. Lord Wu Sang, the remaining members of the Shao family should have just left, a barbarian tribe soldier said respectfully after checking the ruts on the ground. "Well, there's no time to lose. Let's hurry up and catch up with them. The girl from the Shao family is the person that Holy Sun Xueling wants. If we can't get her back, you will all be thrown into the blood-dissolving demon pool," the totem warrior named Wu Sang said coldly. Hearing about the blood-dissolving demon pool, many of the barbarian tribe soldiers around trembled. Even the barbarian tribe people who were not afraid of death would be terrified of watching their own bodies melt. After that, the barbarian tribe cavalry, led by Wu Sang and other totem warriors, chased after Yiguchin and the people of the Shao family. On the other side, Yiguchin was driving the carriage. He had also learned some basic information from the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man was called Shao Lai. He was the master of the Shao family in Wuyan City. The Shao family was not a super family. It was just an ordinary small family. There was no heaven and earth spirit bridge expert. The person with the highest cultivation in the Shao family was only Shao Lai, the master of the 9 changes of divine soul. 7 days ago, the entire Wuyan city was attacked by the blood barbarian tribe. Xiao Lai took his wife, Madame Xiao, daughter Xiao Wanru, and a group of elders and guards out of Wuyan City. They wanted to escape to northern Liang City. However, who knew that there was a holy son among the blood barbarian tribe who participated in the attack? The holy son accidentally saw Xiao Wanru and wanted to capture her alive. Xiao Lai would not let his daughter fall into the hands of the blood barbarian tribe. After that, he fought with the holy son. The holy son of the barbarian tribe was at least at the 8 changes of divine soul. Coupled with the strange totem power and various barbarian methods, Xiao Lai was not a match for him. He was even seriously injured. However, Xiao Lai and the group of elders and guards managed to carve out a bloody path for themselves. However, the elders were all sacrificed. Only Xiao Lai and a few remaining guards were left. They fled with Madame Xiao and Xiao Wanru. I have some healing elixirs. Brother Xiao, take them. After understanding the situation, Yi Guchen directly handed a jade bottle to Xiao Lai. Thank you, little brother. Xiao Lai took it casually. He did not care much at first. However, when he opened the bottle, he was shocked by the thick pill fragrance. This is a supreme grade elixir. Xiao Lai was stunned. He thought that Yi Guchen was just a lone cultivator and the elixirs he gave should be ordinary healing elixirs. He did not expect them to be supreme grade elixirs. This level of medicinal pill was not something that anyone could casually take out. Even his Xiao family only had a few elixirs. They were treated like treasures and would not use them unless they really needed them. However, this young man in front of him casually took out a bottle and looked like he did not care much about it. Xiao Lai looked at Yi Guchen again and finally understood that this young man with a bamboo hat covering his face was not a simple character. Xiao Lai took the elixir and distributed it to the injured guards. Oh right, brother Xiao, why are you going to northern Liang City? Yi Guchen asked. In order to get rid of the blood barbarian tribe's pursuit, they did not have to go to northern Liang City. In fact, there were cities closer to northern Liang City. Firstly, northern Liang City is about to hold an exchange meeting between the 7 major forces. That should be the safest place in the entire Great Desolate Mansion. Secondly, northern Liang City is where the Shinto family is based. My daughter, Xiao Wanru, is the fiancée of the Shinto family's prodigy, Shinto Miao. Xiao Lai said with a hint of pride in his tone. Shinto Miao's fiancée? Yi Guchen's eyes revealed a strange look. Chapter 376. The Shinto family was a super family in the Great Desolate Mansion. They had a heaven and earth spirit bridge expert and were very famous. Logically speaking, they should not have any connection with a small family like the Xiao family. However, when Xiao Lai was young, he had unintentionally saved a severely injured warrior. That warrior happened to be an important figure in the Shinto family, Shinto Miao's father. Later on, out of gratitude, Shinto Miao's father promised that if Xiao Lai had a son, he would become sworn brothers with Shinto Miao. If he had a daughter, they would become husband and wife. It was also because of this that Xiao Wanru became Shinto Miao's fiancée. Now that Black Salt City had been breached and the Xiao family was being pursued by the blood barbarian tribe's holy son, Xiao Lai, who had nowhere else to go, could only bring Xiao Wanru to the Shinto family in northern Liang City. Yi Guchen did not have a deep impression of Shinto Miao, nor did he have a good impression of him. Back in the Tianhuang Plains, Xia Yubing had joined forces with Shinto Miao to hunt him down. Shinto Miao had also attacked him in the Void Sword realm. However, Yi Guchen did not care about Shinto Miao now. He and Shinto Miao were no longer on the same level. Hence, when Yi Guchen knew that the girl in the carriage, Xiao Wanru, was Shinto Miao's fiancée, he did not have any reaction. He would not implicate his fiancée for Shinto Miao. After all, Yi Guchen would part ways with them when they reached northern Liang City. Inside the carriage, Xiao Wanru's face had a tinge of melancholy. She probed, "Mother, Wanru does not want to marry Shinto Miao." "Silly girl, what nonsense are you talking about? The Shinto family is a super family in the Great Desolate Mansion. That Shinto Miao is even more talented. He even entered a top force like the Sealed Blade Royal Palace. You have to know that the 7 major forces are existences that we can only look up to, Madame Xiao said with a yearning look. Just the Shinto family was enough to make Madame Xiao kneel, not to mention the 7 major forces. But Wanru does not like Shinto Miao, Xiao Wanru said with grievance. Xiao Wanru had seen Shinto Miao before. He was tall and strong, and his body was covered in red demonic patterns. He was no different from a barbarian. Moreover, she knew Shinto Miao's character. He called himself Mad Blade and was arrogant and conceited. Xiao Wanru really did not like people like him. Girl, do you think I don't know what you're thinking? You like sword cultivators like Yi Guqin from the sword sect? But firstly, that Yi Guqin is already dead. Secondly, even if he's not dead, with our status and identity, can we form a connection with such geniuses? Even a snobbish person like Madame Xiao would exclaim in admiration when she mentioned Yi Guqin. In her eyes, Yi Guqin's status was naturally higher than Shinto Miao's, but it was a pity that he was already dead. When Xiao Wanru heard this, her beautiful eyes were filled with disappointment. So don't even think about Yi Guqin. Just follow young Master Shinto with peace of mind. This is such a good opportunity, and it's your father's good fortune to have saved old Master Shinto. If you dare to go back on your word, I won't let you off. Madame Xiao said with conviction. In her eyes, it was glorious to be the wife of a great family's young master. However, Xiao Wanru was not only unhappy, but also wanted to go back on her word. Wasn't this a public slap to the Shinto family's face? Therefore, Madame Xiao would definitely not allow Xiao Wanru to go back on her word. Mother, you only know how to please the Shinto family. Don't you care about my happiness? Xiao Wanru's eyes were watery as she spoke with grievance. She was a young girl in her prime. Which young girl would not yearn for love? In Xiao Wanru's heart, Yi Guqin had long been the standard for her other half. Feelings are nurtured. With status and identity, there will naturally be happiness. Don't worry, I'm thinking for you. Don't make things difficult for father and mother, okay? Madame Xiao spoke with emotion and reason, leaving Xiao Wanru speechless. Although her face was full of bitterness, she still nodded with grievance. That's right. Don't worry, young Master Shinto will not treat us unfairly, Madame Xiao said with a smile. Outside the carriage. Although Yi Guqin had no intention of eavesdropping on their conversation, Madame Xiao and Xiao Wanru's voices were not soft. Therefore, even if Yi Guqin did not want to listen, he still heard them. He did not expect that a young girl he had never met would have a trace of longing for him. However, Yi Guqin was not a sentimental person. He would not help Xiao Wanru go back on her word just because of her longing for him. This was someone else's family matter. Yi Guqin would not meddle in other people's business. Therefore, Yi Guqin only pretended not to hear and drove the carriage with peace of mind. About 2 hours later, Yi Guqin's eyes suddenly became sharp as he sat in the carriage. Big brother Xiao, you have to be careful, Yi Guqin suddenly said. Little brother, what do you mean? Xiao Lai did not understand. Yi Guqin frowned slightly. Although Xiao Lai had the cultivation of the 9 transformations of the divine soul, his perception was far inferior to Yi Guqin's. Yi Guqin could already feel the tremors of the horse's hooves coming from the ground behind them. At the same time, there was also the smell of blood. Bush, bush, bush. Suddenly, a series of blood-red arrows were shot from behind. They left a trail of blood-red afterimages in the air. They were aimed at the carriage and Yi Guqin's men. Be careful. The sudden attack caused the Xiao family guards around the carriage to turn pale with fright. Xiao Lai's expression also changed. Hearing the whistling sound of the arrows, Madame Zhao's expression changed and she hurriedly lifted the curtain. Madam, be careful. Seeing the blood-red arrows shooting towards them, Xiao Lai stepped on the horse's back and pulled Madame Zhao's hand, pulling her out of the carriage. Our daughter is still inside. Madame Xiao screamed. Xiao Lai's expression also changed. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed and he entered the carriage in a flash. At this moment, a blood-red arrow had already shot into the carriage. The thin wooden planks of the carriage were like paper, without the slightest bit of defense. Xiao Wanru's jade-like face turned pale. At this moment, an arm suddenly wrapped around Xiao Wanru's slender waist. following which, Xiao Wanru felt her delicate body being pulled into a person's embrace. Her fringed long dress was thin and her graceful body was almost pressed tightly against that person's body. Xiao Wanru was just about to struggle when she heard a young man's voice. "Don't move!" Yiguchen stretched out his other hand and caught the blood-red arrow with his bare hands. Xiao Wanru stared blankly, her eyes filled with shock. In the next moment, Yiguchen tapped his toes and hugged Xiao Wanru as they quickly exited the carriage. Bush, bush, bush. The blood-red arrows shot out in succession, turning the carriage into a sieve. "Daughter, no!" Madame Xiao cried out in grief. If Xiao Wanru died, then she would have nothing to do with the Shinto family anymore. To Madame Xiao, who dreamed of being above others, this result was unacceptable. However, two figures flew out of the carriage. They were Yi Guchen and Xiao Wanru. "Thank you, little brother," Xiao Lai said emotionally when he saw that Xiao Wanru was unharmed. Seeing this, Madame Zhao's face was also filled with joy, but it suddenly darkened. "Why are you hugging my daughter? Let go of her. She is young Master Shinta Miao's fiancée." As Shinta Miao's fiancée, Madame Xiao naturally did not want to see her being hugged and taken advantage of by another man. Even though Yiguchen had done this in a moment of desperation to save Xiao Wanru, it still made Madame Xiao unhappy. Chapter 377. Xiao Wanru, who was in Yiguchen's arms, was a little flustered at first. But after knowing that Yiguchen was trying to save her, she obediently did not move. The moment Yiguchen brought her out of the carriage, the wind lifted the black veil that covered Yiguchen's face, and Xiao Wanru inadvertently caught a glimpse of Yiguchen's face. So beautiful! Xiao Wanru was stunned for a moment. Yiguchen's appearance was already handsome, and with those deep, dark eyes, there was a strange attraction. In comparison, Shinta Miao looked like a country bumpkin. Xiao Wanru had only heard of Yiguchen's deeds, but had never seen him in person, so she did not know that this handsome youth in front of her was the sword master Yiguchen that she had always yearned for. Just as Xiao Wanru was feeling curious about this youth wearing a bamboo hat, Madame Zhao's sharp voice was heard. "I'm talking to you, quickly put down my daughter. She is not someone you can touch." Madame Xiao screamed like a plucked hen. She had already decided that Xiao Wanru would be the young madam of the Shinto family in the future. How could the young madam of a super family be touched by others? Yiguchen's eyes were cold, and he let go of Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru's face turned red. It was Yi Guchen who had saved her life, but her mother still treated Yiguchen in such a tone. "Mother, don't say any more." Xiao Wanru felt a little embarrassed and stomped her feet at Madame Xiao. At the same time, she thought that the youth might be a little angry. But Xiao Wanru was thinking too much. Why would Yiguchen care about such things? His gaze was fixed on the approaching group of figures. The aura of the few barbarians at the front far exceeded that of the surrounding barbarian soldiers. Totem warriors. Yiguchen's eyes showed that he was thinking. This was the first time he had met the true pillars of the barbarians, the totem warriors. He Xiao family run. Wu Sang, the leader of the totem warriors, revealed a cold smile at the corners of his mouth, as if he was a vicious wolf. The barbarian soldiers had gradually surrounded them. "Master, quickly take Madam and young Miss away. We'll hold them off." A guard who was injured by an arrow shouted. Because the barbarian tribe's sneak attack was caught off guard, two of the guards were directly hit by the arrows and their fighting strength dropped by half. Even if the holy son of the blood barbarian tribe did not come in person, the barbarians in front of them were not people they could casually contend with. "Hehe, do you think you can escape?" Wu Sang waved his hand. Dozens of barbarian soldiers, including a few totem warriors around him, rushed forward. "Patriarch, hurry up and leave. Don't hesitate," a guard shouted again. "Husband, let's run. Even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for your daughter." Madame Zhao's face, which was covered with makeup, turned pale from fear when she saw the blood barbarian tribe charging toward them. She still wanted to rely on Xiao Wanru to enter the Shinto family and become the old madam. How could she be willing to die here? "Sai, you all?" Xiao Lai's eyes were filled with guilt. These guards were loyal to the Xiao family, but he could not protect them. However, because of Xiao Wanru, Xiao Lai finally made up his mind. "Little brother, let's go." Xiao Lai did not forget to call Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen was an outsider. There was no need for him to sacrifice himself and buy time for them. "Husband, don't shout. Since that young man is willing to sacrifice himself for Wanru, let him go." Madame Xiao pulled Xiao Wanru onto a horse. Seeing that Yi Guchen did not seem to have any reaction, Xiao Lai sighed deeply. He hardened his heart and turned around, leading Madame Xiao and Xiao Wanru far away. "Master, be careful." Xiao Wanru cried out as she was forcefully pulled onto a horse by Madame Xiao. "We can't let that Xiao family girl go. Chase after her." Wu Sang saw the situation and was about to attack. "Damn barbarians, don't even think about chasing after the master. If you want to go, you have to step over my dead body first." Several guards roared and rushed forward to kill those barbarian soldiers. Then, they started to fight with the totem warriors as well as those barbarian soldiers. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed and he also attacked. His target was a totem warrior. "You dare to take the initiative to attack? You're courting death." When the totem warrior saw Yi Guchen charging forward, he smiled viciously. He raised the scimitar in his hand and slashed down at Yi Guchen. The barbarians were born with divine strength. In addition to the barbarians' unique body-refining techniques, their strength was incomparably strong, far surpassing that of ordinary dynasty warriors. The totem warrior seemed to be able to see the young man in front of him being split in half by his scimitar. However, imagination was just imagination. Who asked him to face Yi Guchen? Clang! Yi Guchen lightly extended 2 fingers. Under the shocked gaze of the totem warrior, he directly clamped the blade of the scimitar and exerted force. Crack! A good scimitar with spiritual inscriptions was directly broken into 2 pieces. How is this possible? The totem warrior's eyes almost popped out, and his heart was in turmoil. Yi Guchen's gaze was indifferent. He directly stabbed the broken blade into the totem warrior's chest. This totem warrior did not even release his own totem before he was sent flying. He fell to the ground and did not move. Wu Sang, who was about to chase after Xiao Lai and the others, sensed the movement here. He looked over and his face suddenly froze. He saw Yi Guchen's wave-like subtle steps, as if he was a ghost. Every time he attacked, a barbarian would fall. No matter if it was an ordinary soldier or a totem warrior, they would all die in one move. Damn it, there's an expert from the dynasty. Wu Sang's face suddenly changed. As the leader of this small team, he naturally had some experience. At this moment, he did not have time to chase after Xiao Lai and the others who had fled far away. Instead, he took out a cold long blade and directly attacked Yi Guchen. 9 changes of the divine soul. Looking at Wu Sang, Yi Guchen made up his mind. This was a totem warrior whose strength was comparable to the 9 changes of the divine soul. Boy, looking at the blood barbarians falling one by one, Wu Sang's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The totem power in his body erupted, and the cold blade light broke through the air toward Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen stretched out his hand, and a blood-red long sword with saw-like teeth fell into his hand. It was the bloody hell sword. Vigorous, genuine chi poured into the bloody hell sword, directly activating the blood spirit array. A blood-red sword light blasted out and collided with the blade light. Yi Guchen and Wu Sang were locked in a fierce battle. Every time Wu Sang landed, the power of his blade was incomparably vigorous, as if it contained the power of 1,000 caddies. But what shocked Wu Sang was that the seemingly thin youth in front of him calmly received his blade moves without the slightest bit of strain. It was as if the clouds and the wind were blowing lightly. Blood demon body refining technique. Wu Sang shouted loudly. He no longer had the slightest bit of contempt for Yi Guchen and directly went all out. Blood-red demonic patterns spread on the surface of his body, causing his already strong body to swell like a balloon. Naturally, his strength also increased by several times. Is this the barbarian tribe's body refining technique? Yi Guchen was a little curious. Presumably, The red demonic patterns on Shin Tu Miao's body were also obtained from the barbarian tribe's body refining technique. Boy, take another blade of mine. After his strength multiplied, Wu Sang once again slashed down with his blade. Clang. Yi Guchen casually waved his sword, and Wu Sang's full-powered blade was directly sent flying. The blade shattered inch by inch as it flew out, exploding into fragments. Wu Sang was stunned, and somewhat could not believe what he had seen. Even among the totem warriors, he was considered powerful. But in the end, even after using the body refining technique and increasing his strength by several times, he was still defeated by the youth in front of him with a bamboo hat covering his face. What did this mean? A thought appeared in Wu Sang's mind, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Damn it, you are not an ordinary dynasty ancient martial art practitioner, but a top genius of the 7 major forces. Wu Sang shouted in shock. Chapter 378. At such a young age, he had such a cultivation and could even block his full blow. It would be strange if he could not guess Yi Guchen's identity. Wu Sang was sure that the young man in front of him must be a top genius carefully cultivated by the 7 forces of the Saint Origin dynasty. Only the holy sons and holy daughters can deal with the top geniuses of the 7 forces. Go back and report to the holy son of Xueling. Wu Sang was very decisive, without the slightest hesitation. He knew that in the face of the top geniuses of the 7 forces, even if he had a cultivation comparable to the 9 changes of the divine soul realm, it would be useless. Do you think you can escape? Yi Guchen's eyes were calm. His sword resonated with the void as he displayed the void sword skill, 1,000 waves. The fierce sword wave surged out like a huge wave. It was not only aimed at Wu Sang, but also at the surrounding barbarian tribe soldiers and totem warriors. The blood barbarians fell to the ground one after another, as if they were harvesting rice. The corners of Wu Sang's eyes twitched when he saw this. He immediately let out a furious roar, and a blood-red light shot out from his chest, forming a blood-red scorpion totem. Elite Totem, Demon Scorpion. With the appearance of the Demon Scorpion totem, Wu Sang's aura soared again. At the same time, a very illusory scorpion tail formed by the power of the blood-red totem emerged from behind him. The tail hook of the scorpion tail bloomed with a sharp light. Obviously, it had a good attack power. Don't think that you can ignore the brave totem warriors just because you are one of the top heaven's prides of the 7 great powers. Wu Sang roared, and the scorpion tail directly pierced towards Yi Guchen. Totem power can be used in this way. Yi Guchen's eyes lit up slightly. The reason why he did not leave when Xiaolai called him was that he wanted to understand the magical effects of totems through these totem warriors. Yi Guchen also knew some of these magical effects. Immediately, Yi Guchen activated the Azure Dragon totem on his left arm. A misty azure light covered Yi Guchen's left arm. At the same time, it seemed to emit a dragon's roar. Immediately, the green light gathered and attached itself to Yi Guchen's left arm. It looked like the claw of an illusory green dragon. This is... Wu Sang's eyes widened like copper bells. Previously, he was only shocked by Yi Guchen's strength. But now, Wu Sang was completely stunned. At the same time that Yi Guchen activated the Azure Dragon totem, his demonic scorpion totem began to tremble violently, as if it was being suppressed by a superior being. The scorpion's tail, which originally still had some power, also rippled and its power weakened by at least half. How is this possible? That's the highest totem of the Wood tribe. For you. Wu Sang's expression changed drastically. It was as if he had just seen something ridiculous. Not only was the young man in front of him the same as him, he had also used the totem possession technique. Moreover, Yi Guchen's totem was suppressing Wu Sang's totem. My demonic scorpion totem is an elite totem, and this young man's totem can suppress me. It's at least a supreme totem. Damn it. That's a totem that only saints and saintesses have. Wu Sang howled in his heart. He could not believe what was happening in front of him. Although he did not know what Yi Guchen's totem was, the suppression from the totem was unquestionable. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed with cold electricity. He reached out his azure dragon claw and grabbed Wu Sang's neck. Even though Wu Sang was tall and strong, he still half knelt down. He was almost unable to breathe because of Yi Guchen's choke. Yi Guchen's eyes were deep as he said, "You're surprised to see this totem? But why do you have a supreme totem? This is something that only saints and saintesses can have. For you." Wu Sang's face turned red. But Yi Guchen looked surprised. No wonder Wu Sang was so surprised when he used the Azure Dragon totem. It turned out that the totem he had was of a very high level. Only saints and saintesses could have it. But Yi Guchen also had doubts. He did not only have one totem, but a total of 5. People like me who have a supreme totem can only have one? Yi Guchen asked again. He wanted to find out more about the totem. You don't know this. Damn it. You're definitely not a barbarian. But you're not a barbarian. If you have a supreme totem, you'll definitely be judged by the 5 Elements Temple. Wu Sang opened his eyes wide and shouted. The supreme totem was the most precious inheritance even among the barbarians. The barbarians would not allow anyone other than barbarians to have a supreme totem. After that, after confirming that Yi Guchen was not a barbarian, no matter what he asked, Wu Sang did not answer. Yi Guchen did not hesitate and strangled Wu Sang. Although he did not get much information from Wu Sang. But Yi Guchen at least knew. He reckoned that the 5 totems in his body were rare even among the barbarian race. And he could not casually reveal them, at least not with his original identity. It seems that the 5 Elements Temple should have some connection with the 5 totems on my body. But if I fight with my original identity, I won't use the power of the totem. In the future, I can use the totem to blend into the barbarians. Yi Guchen had a plan in mind. He looked around. All the blood barbarians around him were dead. It was a pity that the few loyal guards had also died in the previous battle. Yi Guchen sighed slightly. He cut open a deep pit with his sword and buried the bodies of the guards in it. After that, Yi Guchen followed the tracks of the horses that Xiao Lai and the others had left behind. His footsteps flashed as he chased after them. He still needed to rely on Xiao Lai and the others to take him to northern Liang City. While Yi Guchen was rushing to Xiao Lai and the others, hundreds of miles away, in another city. In the city, fire burned, thick smoke billowed, and the cries of countless people resounded in all directions. The fierce-looking blood barbarian soldiers guarded the 4 entrances and exits of the city, blocking everything. And at the gate of the city, a tall and thin man in a blood-red shirt looked at a trembling girl in front of him with a lustful and cold look on his face. A row of blood barbarian totem warriors stood in 2 rows, and their eyes also revealed an evil look. The man in the blood-red shirt waved one hand, and the clothes of the girl in front of him were directly torn into rags, revealing her snow-white and beautiful body. The man in the blood-red shirt did not have the slightest scruple. In front of all the totem warriors and blood barbarian soldiers present, he pressed the girl to the ground and ravaged her. Not long after, the man in the blood-red shirt got up. The girl was no longer breathing and a large amount of blood flowed from her lower body. "Holy Sun, I have something to report." Suddenly, a totem warrior on horseback rushed over and knelt in front of the man in the blood-red shirt. "What's the matter?" "We lost contact with Wu Sang," the totem warrior said. "Oh, did that trash fail? His cultivation is comparable to the divine soul 9 changes, and Xiao Lai was severely injured by me. He should not have much strength left," the man in the blood-red shirt said with a cold look in his eyes. He was a holy son of the blood barbarian tribe, Xueling. "Holy Sun, what should we do now?" the totem warrior asked. "This city is almost finished. Take a group of totem warriors with you and follow me. I left a trick on Xiao Lai, and their whereabouts are always under my control." The holy son of Xueling revealed a sinister smile. He slowly raised his hand, and a blood-colored centipede could be vaguely seen in his sleeve. "Xiao Wanru, you can't escape from me." The holy son of Xueling stuck out his scarlet tongue and licked his lips, his eyes full of lust. Chapter 379. In the desolate Gobi Desert, wind and sand filled the sky. Xiao Lai, Madame Xiao and Xiao Wanru, who were riding Fergana horses, had been running continuously for a day and a night. "Husband, let's stop and rest." Madame Xiao, who was sitting on the horse, panted and complained. How could a woman like her, who had no martial arts cultivation, bear sitting on a bumpy horse for a day and a night? On the other hand, Xiao Wanru, who had a weaker physique, did not complain even though she was exhausted and in pain. "Madam, please hold on for a while longer. We can't let our brother's efforts go to waste," Xiao Lai said in a low voice. Those guards had stayed to protect them and fought with the blood barbarians. If they were caught by the blood barbarians because they were resting, they would have let down those loyal guards. "But I can't stand it anymore. Can we find a carriage?" Madame Xiao complained as she rubbed her aching butt. Riding a horse was not as comfortable as riding a carriage. "Madam, don't talk nonsense. We are running for our lives now. Where can we find a carriage for you?" Xiao Lai looked helpless. He was the one who had spoiled Madame Xiao. "Damn it, the carriage is gone and the guards are dead. It's all because of that young man. If we didn't bring him along, we wouldn't have been so slow and the blood barbarians wouldn't have caught up." Madame Xiao was full of resentment and had nowhere to vent. She directly pushed the blame to Yiguchen. "Madam, you are too much." Xiao Lai frowned. "Mother, what are you talking about? If that young master didn't save Wanru, she would have died." Xiao Wanru also frowned and felt injustice for Yiguchen. "He saved you because he felt guilty for dragging us down. Wanru, don't help others just because they treat you a little better." Madame Zhao's face was stern and her tone was cold when she saw that Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru were speaking for Yiguchen. "Okay, stop talking. Let's continue." Xiao Lai waved his hand and did not want to say anything more. But at this moment, the sound of wind breaking came from afar and a figure flashed quickly. "Damn it. Did the blood barbarians catch up?" Xiao Lai was shocked. Husband, let's run." Madame Xiao, who had just said that she wanted to rest, suddenly changed her expression. She was more panicked than anyone else. "Brother Xiao, it's me." The figure landed. He was wearing a black robe and a bamboo hat. It was Yiguchen. "Little brother." Xiao Lai opened his mouth slightly when he saw that it was Yiguchen. He had never thought that Yiguchen would be able to escape from the totem warriors of the blood barbarians. "It's you? You didn't die?" Madame Xiao, who had a panicked look on her face, also hid her shock. However, her eyes were immediately filled with doubt. "That is, it's great." Xiao, the barbarian, was Xiao Lai's, and Xiao and Xiao was Blood's, Xiao, S's. "It's good that little brother is fine. Those guards of my Xiao family." Xiao Lai wanted to say something but stopped. He thought that since Yiguchen could escape, the guards should be able to escape too. "They are all dead," Yiguchen said truthfully. "Sai, is that so?" Hearing this, Xiao Lai's face was filled with disappointment. Although he had expected it, he was still disappointed. However, after hearing Yiguchen's words, the suspicion in Madame Zhao's eyes intensified. She suddenly opened her mouth and said, "Could it be that after we left, you left those guards behind and escaped alone?" Yiguchen frowned. He had killed Wu Sang and the rest of the blood barbarians, but in Madame Zhao's eyes, he was a deserter. "Madam, this little brother is not that kind of person," Xiao Lai said hurriedly. When Yiguchen threw out the supreme grade treasure pill, Xiao Lai felt that Yiguchen was extraordinary. So, he did not suspect Yiguchen. He was just a little surprised. But Madame Xiao did not think so. She sneered and said, "Husband, don't side with this person. Those guards are not weak. They are all dead, but this young man escaped alive. This is too strange. Maybe he was bought by the blood barbarians." Madame Zhao's eyes were filled with hostility. Madame Xiao did not have a good impression of Yiguchen. Now that Yiguchen had escaped alone, Madame Xiao was even more suspicious of him. "Madam, you can't say that," Xiao Lai scolded, which was rare. "Mother, what are you talking about?" Xiao Wanru was also a little angry. Yiguchen's eyes darkened. "What? You can't say anything. Then tell me, how did you escape?" Madame Xiao put her hands on her waist and stared at Yiguchen. "I didn't escape. I killed all the blood barbarians, Yi Guchen said indifferently. Xiao Lai's pupils shrank when he heard this. He knew that it was not easy to kill a group of blood barbarians. There were even powerful totem warriors among them. When Xiao Wanru heard this, she was pleasantly surprised. She looked at Yi Guchen with curiosity in her beautiful eyes. However, Mrs. Xiao couldn't help but laugh mockingly as if she had heard a funny joke. Huh, a young man like you killed a group of blood barbarians. Who do you think you are? Yi Guchen from the sword sect? You can't say such ridiculous things if you want to attract my Wanru's attention. Madame Zhao's eyes were filled with disdain. She thought that Yi Guchen was lying because he liked Xiao Wanru and wanted to attract her attention and worship. If that's the case, then I'll take my leave, Yi Guchen said coldly. With his personality, he did not want to argue with a woman. Since Madame Xiao questioned him, Yi Guchen could leave. Because of his relationship with Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru, Yi Guchen did not mind escorting them to northern Liang City. But since others questioned him, Yi Guchen did not need to help them. At most, he could find someone else to find out the route to northern Liang City. Little brother, please wait. Madame Xiao is ignorant. Please don't mind her. Xiao Lai hurriedly said when he saw that Yi Guchen was about to leave. Madame Xiao was ignorant, but Xiao Lai knew. He guessed that Yi Guchen's background was not that simple. He might be an outstanding disciple of a large family. Xiao Lai could not afford to offend such a person. Young master, Wanru apologizes on behalf of my mother. Xiao Wanru bowed to Yi Guchen. Madame Xiao gritted her teeth when she saw that her daughter and husband were siding with Yi Guchen. Her face turned green and white. Why are you all siding with this outsider? As long as we can escape to northern Liang City, we will be part of the Shinto family. You are lowering your status by doing this. Shut up, Xiao Lai shouted coldly. For the first time, he was imposing. Xiao Lai? Madame Zhao's face was ashen, but she did not say anything in the end. She only glared angrily at Yi Guchen. Although Yi Guchen disliked Madame Xiao, he still had a good impression of Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru. So Yi Guchen stayed in the end. Chapter 380. Yi Guchen and the other three continued their journey towards northern Liang City. Another 2 days passed in this manner. They encountered a few waves of barbarians. Fortunately, they were not from the blood barbarians and were mostly ordinary barbarian tribe soldiers. Therefore, Yi Guchen did not make a move. Xiao Lai alone was enough to solve the problem. However, this made Madame Xiao look at Yi Guchen with even more disdain. In her opinion, they were protecting Yi Guchen, not the other way around. Yi Guchen was helping them. Yi Guchen did not care about this and completely ignored Madame Zhao's harsh gaze. He felt a little uneasy. The blood barbarians would not give up on their prey so easily. Moreover, he knew from Xiao Lai that the holy son of the blood barbarian tribe was a very cruel and ruthless person. He would not let them off so easily. However, Yi Guchen was not afraid. He also wanted to meet the prodigies of the barbarian tribe. He wanted to see how the so-called holy son and holy daughter were compared to the top prodigies of the 7 major forces. At night, the celestial emperor's sword turned into a bright moon and scattered its cold light. Yi Guchen and the other 3 sat around the bonfire. It had been a few days and there was no trace of the blood barbarians. Not to mention Madame Xiao, even Xiao Lai thought that they had shaken off the blood barbarians. Therefore, under Madame Zhao's strong request, Xiao Lai chose to rest. Brother Xiao, I think we should hurry. The blood barbarians will not give up so easily. Yi Guchen was still a little vigilant. Before Xiao Lai could say anything, Madame Xiao immediately screamed, "What are you talking about? Have you done anything to deal with the barbarian race in the past 2 days? Wasn't it my husband who did it? Look at you now, you're sitting here pointing fingers at us. We've already shaken off the blood barbarian race, how could they possibly catch up?" Madame Xiao was already full of resentment towards Yi Guchen. Now, she vented her anger and pointed at Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen's face turned slightly cold. Even with his indifferent personality, he felt a trace of impatience towards Madame Xiao. If it weren't for Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru, Yi Guchen would have left long ago. Alright, let's not talk too much. Little brother, aren't you a little too nervous? We will reach northern Liang City in a few days, so you can be at ease. Even Xiao Lai heaved a sigh of relief at this moment. However, Xiao Lai suddenly started coughing violently. Father, what's wrong? Xiao Wanru hurriedly went forward and pounded Xiao Lai's back. Big brother Xiao, didn't you take the pill? Yi Guchen suddenly frowned. Logically speaking, the effects of the supreme rank pellet that he had given Xiao Lai should have been very strong. However, Xiao Lai was still coughing and looked a little weak. It's nothing. It's just that my chest feels a little tight. Xiao Lai waved his hand and said. A dark light flashed in Yi Guchen's eyes as he said, Big brother Xiao, please take a look at my wound. Xiao Lai was slightly taken aback when he heard this. He didn't think much about it and directly pulled open the front of his shirt. There was a blood-red palm print that looked like it was about to fester. Vaguely, there seemed to be something wriggling under the skin. Could it be? Yi Guchen directly went forward and raised his palm. The heavenly sun dark fire spewed out. Yi Guchen controlled the strange fire's temperature and directly slapped the blood-red palm print on Xiao Lai's chest. Ah! Xiao Lai was caught off guard and suddenly let out a scream. What are you doing? Madame Xiao screamed in shock. Xiao Wanru was also stunned for a moment. The strange fire burned Xiao Lai's chest, and the festering skin was directly charred black. Accompanied by a hissing sound, a blood-red insect seemed to be unable to withstand the strange fire's temperature and rushed out. Yi Guchen pinched the blood-red insect with one hand. His eyes focused, and the flames rose and burned it to ashes. Little brother, that is. Xiao Lai was sweating profusely and said weakly. It should be the goo of the blood barbarian tribe, Yi Guchen said in a deep voice. Although he did not understand the methods of the blood barbarian tribe, he had the spirit star soul devouring parasite in his body before, so he knew a little about the goo. Thank you, little brother, for saving my life, Xiao Lai said gratefully. After getting rid of the goo, he clearly felt that his body was much more relaxed. Madame Zhao's face was a little embarrassed and unnatural. Just now, she was still shouting, thinking that Yi Guchen had revealed his true colors and wanted to kill Xiao Lai. In the end, he was treating Xiao Lai. However, she did not have the intention to apologize to Yi Guchen. She just pretended that nothing had happened and sat aside. The way Xiao Wanru looked at Yi Guchen was also filled with a strange and curious look. Yi Guchen's face was still a little dignified. He said to himself in his heart, it seems that the journey to northern Liang City will not be too peaceful. Yi Guchen vaguely guessed that the function of this blood-red goo should not only be to destroy the body, but also to let the caster of the goo obtain information about the location of the goo. And at the moment when Yi Guchen burned the goo worms with his strange fire. In another place, the blood spirit saint, who was dressed in a blood-red robe, had a slight change in expression, and then a playful look appeared on his face. With Xiao Lai's cultivation level, he could actually discover my method. But it doesn't matter. It's impossible for you to escape to northern Liang City alive. The blood spirit saint's eyes were cold. He held a blood-red goo in his hand, which was exactly the same as the one in Xiao Lai's body. On the other side, Yi Guchen sat quietly beside the bonfire with his eyes closed. He already had a guess in his heart that it was impossible to reach northern Liang City safely. Then Yi Guchen could only recuperate and wait for the battle with the blood barbarian tribe's saint. At this moment, Xiao Wanru, who was wearing a tasseled long dress, sat silently beside Yi Guchen. Xiao Wanru glanced at Yi Guchen and said, Young master, thank you for saving my father. Yi Guchen opened his eyes slightly and said lightly, It's no big deal. It's just a matter of convenience. Xiao Wanru said apologetically, Also about mother. She has such a character. I hope you don't mind. Wanru apologizes to you on behalf of mother. Looking at the considerate and gentle girl in front of him, Yi Guchen nodded slightly. I won't care about this kind of thing. Xiao Wanru blinked and said, Young master is really magnanimous. By the way, Wanru still doesn't know your name. My surname is Yi, Yi Guchen said lightly. Yi. Xiao Wanru's beautiful eyes suddenly narrowed, and her expression froze slightly. Then she laughed and said, "Young master and Yiguchin of the sword sect have the same surname." Xiao Wanru naturally wouldn't associate the young man in front of her with the sword sect. After all, Yiguchin was already dead. Xiao Wanru instinctively ruled it out. Is that so? So what? Yiguchin didn't care. Young master should know the name of the sword sect. Wanru truly yearns for such a peerless sword cultivator. Unfortunately, I'm not fated to meet him in this life. It's even impossible to find someone similar to him. Xiao Wanru sighed when she thought about how she was going to marry Shinta Miao. What's so good about the sword sect? Even with a sword in hand, they can't protect the people around them. Yiguchin looked at the bonfire and thought about Su Jianshi, who had been unconscious until now. He thought about Sidu Hongxue and Mu Xingzu. He sighed and said with a sigh. However, when Xiao Wanru heard this, the smile on her face disappeared, and her expression turned solemn. Young Master Yi, although Wanru admires you, please don't slander Yiguchin so easily. He's not someone you can casually comment on. Yiguchin was a little stunned when he heard this. He felt a little self-reproachful, but in Xiao Wanru's eyes, he was slandering the sword sect. Even Yiguchin was a little speechless. Xiao Wanru originally had a good impression of Yiguchin, but after hearing Yiguchin's words, her interest waned. She thought that the young man in front of her was a little arrogant and had casually commented on the sword sect. She couldn't help but feel disappointed. Young master, Wanru will go rest first. Xiao Wanru returned to Madame Zhao's side. Madame Zhao was overjoyed when she saw that her daughter seemed to have some conflict with Yiguchin. She looked at Yiguchin with a teasing smile in her eyes. It's impossible for a toad to want to eat a swan's meat. My daughter will arrive in northern Liang City in a few days and will be the young mistress of the Shintu family. Not just anyone can match up to her. Madame Zhao's tone was a little proud. She glanced at Yiguchin with a trace of disdain in her eyes. Yiguchin ignored her. With Yiguchin's true strength, even Shinta Miao could only kneel in front of him. Therefore, it was hard to say who was the toad and who was the swan. Chapter 381. After a night's rest, Yiguchin and the other three had recovered some energy. After another day, a canyon suddenly appeared in front of Yiguchin and the others. There was only one road in the canyon. It was narrow and long, extending into the distance. When Xiao Lai saw this gorge, his eyes revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He turned to look at Yiguchin and said with a hint of joy in his voice, "Little brother, after we pass through this natural moat gorge, we'll be less than 2 days away from northern Liang City. Moreover, the barbarian tribe's sphere of influence hasn't expanded to this place yet. As long as we pass through this natural moat gorge, we'll be safe." Hearing this, Madame Zhao and Xiao Wanru also breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. After all, the pursuit and escape along the way had been mentally and physically exhausting. After entering this canyon, there is only one road. If we are blocked from the front and back, it will be a dead end, Yiguchin said indifferently without any joy on his face. Little brother, are you worried that there will be an ambush in the natural moat gorge? I don't think so. We have already shaken off the blood barbarian tribe. They don't know where we are, Xiao Lai said. I think you are worried that you will not have a chance to meet Wanru after we reach northern Liang City. After all, with her identity, you will not be able to meet her in the future. So, you hope that we will not reach northern Liang City so quickly, right? Madame Zhao said with a hint of sarcasm. She thought that Yiguchin was deliberately delaying their arrival in northern Liang City so that he would have more opportunities to meet Xiao Wanru. All right, mother, don't slander young master anymore, Xiao Wanru rebuked with a slightly red face. In fact, Xiao Wanru had a good impression of this handsome young man who had saved her life. However, Yiguchin's evaluation of the sword sect by the bonfire that night made Xiao Wanru's impression of Yiguchin drop a little. However, she was still grateful to Yiguchin. Yiguchin did not bother to talk to Madame Zhao again. He looked at the heavenly moat gorge and frowned. Yiguchin knew in his heart that Xiao Lai and Madame Zhao were too anxious to listen to his warning. Therefore, Yiguchen simply didn't say anything and followed Xiao Lai and the others into the narrow canyon road. The canyon was narrow and dimly lit. The four of them rode their horses forward. Xiao Lai and Madame Xiao rode at the front, Xiao Wanru was in the middle, and Yiguchen was at the back. Madame Xiao urged the horse forward impatiently. Her powdered face revealed an uncontrollable joy, as if northern Liang City was already right in front of her. But at this moment, from the depths of the dim and narrow road ahead, more than a dozen flashing arrows suddenly burst out, and the sound of breaking wind suddenly rang out. That sharp aura caused Xiao Lai's expression to drastically change. Boom! Madam, be careful! Xiao Lai took out a long blade from his origin ring. As the blade spun, it danced in the air and blocked the arrows. However, there was still an arrow that managed to escape from the gap in the net of blades and pierced through Madame Xiao's shoulder. Ah! Madame Xiao, who was immersed in the beautiful fantasy of the future, suddenly felt a sharp pain in her shoulder. Her entire body was thrown off the horse by the inertia of the arrow and fell to the ground. Her face was covered in dirt, and she clutched her shoulder as she screamed like a chicken being slaughtered. Madam! Mother! Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru's expressions changed as they hurriedly dismounted and helped Madame Xiao up. I'm going to die. A bloody hole appeared on Madame Xiao's shoulder as she screamed incessantly. Yi Guchen's facial expression was calm. He looked ahead. About 5 or 6 totem warriors were wearing blood-red armors. They were walking towards him from the dim and narrow road. Their faces were filled with a cruel and bloodthirsty look. Xiao family patriarch, you are really stupid. Are you in such a hurry to walk into a trap? A totem warrior sneered. There really is an ambush. Xiao Lai gripped the long blade in his hand tightly, his mouth full of bitterness. He once again looked at Yiguchen, who was wearing a bamboo hat, with a trace of regret in his eyes. If he had listened to Yiguchen's words, he would not have ended up like this. Madame Xiao's face was also pale, and her lips were trembling because of the pain. Her hair was in a mess, and her face was covered in dirt. Yiguchen had warned them before, but they did not listen. Madame Xiao even thought that Yiguchen only wanted to slow them down. Now, the totem warriors of the blood barbarian tribe were in front of them, and he still called them stupid. This made Madame Xiao's face turn green and white. She was a little embarrassed. Since you knew that there might be an ambush, why didn't you forcibly stop us? Why did you hurt me? I will be the old madam of the Shinto family in the future. Madame Xiao covered her shoulder and cried out in pain. At the same time, she blamed Yiguchen. Mother, you are injured. Don't talk so much. Xiao Wan repressed the wound on Madame Xiao's shoulder and said. Yiguchen coldly glanced at Madame Xiao and did not say anything. He turned to look at the totem warriors. Little brother, please take Madame and Wanra back the way we came. I will stop them. Xiao Lai held his blade and said while gritting his teeth. Yiguchen was indifferent. Little brother? Xiao Lai looked at Yiguchen, who did not move. He was anxious and puzzled at the same time. Sai, I said that once we enter this place, it is a dead end. There is no way out. Yiguchen sighed slightly. Just as Xiao Lai was about to say something, a cold, snake-like voice suddenly sounded from behind Yiguchen and the other three. Xiao Lai, you are so stupid that it is ridiculous. At the other end of the narrow road, there was also a group of people blocking their way out. The one who spoke was a man in a blood-red shirt. He had a cold and playful smile on his face. His eyes swept over Xiao Lai and the others as if he was looking at dead people. Only when he swept his gaze over Xiao Wanru did his eyes become lustful. Blood Spirit Holy Son, why are you here? Xiao Lai looked at the man in the blood-red shirt. His pupils suddenly shrank as he cried out involuntarily. Oh, didn't you discover the blood-seeking goo poison yourself? The Blood Spirit Holy Son looked at Xiao Lai in surprise. Xiao Lai's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately understood. It turned out that the goo poison in his chest was left by the Blood Spirit Holy Son to track them. However, Xiao Lai had not discovered it. Instead, it was Yi Guchen who had discovered it. Thinking of this, Xiao Lai felt ashamed again. If he had listened to Yiguchen more, they would not have fallen into such a desperate situation. How can the prey that I have set my eyes on escape so easily? Wanru, don't worry, I will treat you well soon. The blood spirit Holy Sun stared at Xiao Wanru and licked his lips with his scarlet tongue. That kind of sinister and lustful gaze made Xiao Wanru's delicate body tremble violently. The blood barbarian tribe, even among the ferocious barbarian tribes, was the most cruel and bloodthirsty. Not to mention that the blood spirit Holy Sun had a somewhat perverted personality. Even a quick death would be a luxury if one fell into his hands. As for you, Xiao Lai, you can die peacefully. And your old wife, I feel disgusted just by looking at her. It's not a bad idea to give her to the warriors under my command. The blood spirit Holy Sun looked at Mrs. Xiao with disgust. Lord Holy Sun, we don't want that kind of old woman with loose lower body. But my ferocious ape might like her. A totem warrior laughed evilly. Madame Xiao, who was already injured, was so angry that she almost vomited blood when she heard such vicious words. But she was also very scared. Her body trembled like a sieve. If she was really raped by a beast, it would be thousands of times more painful than being executed by 1,000 cuts. Mrs. Zhao's face was covered in tears and snot because of fear. She looked extremely miserable. My daughter is young Master Shinto Miao's fiancée. I will also be the old madam of the Shinto family in the future. The Shinto family will not let you off for treating me like this. Mrs. Xiao said in a trembling voice. She hoped that by mentioning the Shinto family, the blood spirit Holy Sun would have some scruples. But the blood spirit Holy Sun laughed when he heard this. What is the Shinto family? What is that trash Shinto Miao? You are really taking advantage of a chicken feather as an arrow. Just nice, let me have a taste of someone else's fiancé. The blood spirit Holy Sun was not afraid of the Shinto family. Instead, he was even more excited. Mrs. Xiao saw this and her face turned pale. She did not expect that by mentioning the Shinto family, it would backfire. The barbarians pressed forward step by step. Xiao Wanru's face was filled with despair. She even had the intention to die. She would rather die than be tainted by the blood spirit Holy Sun. Xiao Lai also had the intention to fight to the death. Sigh. Just when Xiao Lai, Xiao Wanru and the rest were ready to die, a sigh was heard. This sigh reverberated in the narrow canyon and was exceptionally clear. At this moment, even the blood spirit Holy Sun's gaze could not help but fall on the source of the sigh. It was a figure in black with a bamboo hat on his head. Blood spirit Holy Sun, is it? Among the barbarian Holy Sons, I will start with you. Chapter 382. Hearing Yiguchen's words, everyone was stunned. How arrogant must he be to say that he wanted to kill the barbarian Holy Sun? Although the blood barbarian tribe was not the most powerful tribe in the barbarian tribe, its strength was not to be underestimated. Some of the Holy Sons and Holy Daughters of the blood barbarian tribe were quite powerful. They had even fought with some of the geniuses of the 7 superpowers. Therefore, when the saint of Xueling heard this unknown young man say such words, he scratched his ears, thinking that he had misheard. Is it because you think you're about to die that your mind is in a mess? The blood spirit Holy Sun was not angry. He just sneered, thinking that Yiguchen was too flustered to be in a clear state of mind. Not only the Holy Sun of Xueling, but also the surrounding totem warriors laughed out loud, as if they had heard the funniest joke in the world. The Holy Sun of the barbarian race is not someone that any random person can provoke. That's right. Even the top geniuses of the 7 superpowers dare not say such arrogant words. Many totem warriors looked at Yiguchen as if they were looking at a dead man. Even Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru were stunned, let alone the barbarian tribe. Xiao Lai knew that the young man in front of him might have some background. Maybe he was a genius disciple of a big family. But even so, he was not qualified to say such words to the barbarian Holy Sun. As for Madame Xiao, she was even more disheartened. She said, "You are about to die. Why are you still talking nonsense?" Madame Xiao burst into tears. She was about to become the old madam of a super family, but she was intercepted and killed here. This made her feel so sad that she wanted to die. Seeing everyone's attitude, Yiguchen sighed slightly. Why did no one believe him when he told the truth? He said no more. He slowly raised his hand and poured genuine qi into his veins. He flicked his fingers continuously at lightning speed. Bush, bush, bush. The 6 pulses divine sword was launched. Suddenly, a series of real qi fingers darted out, and darted towards the totem warriors who were blocking the road ahead. Yiguchen's action was too abrupt. Not to mention the totem warriors, even the holy son of Xueling was stunned. Suddenly, a series of blood-curdling screams resounded. The heads and hearts of the totem warriors who were standing in front of them had been pierced through by the real qi. Blood splashed out, and pieces of flesh flew in all directions. Xiao Lai was stunned. Although those totem warriors were not particularly powerful, it would still take him a lot of effort to deal with them. However, Yiguchen had only flicked his finger, and those totem warriors had immediately died. They didn't have the slightest power to resist. "Hurry up and leave," Yiguchen shouted in a low voice. Xiao Lai came to his senses and his eyes shone with extreme joy, as if he had been saved from a dead end. At that moment, he did not have the time to consider Yiguchen's strength and identity. He grabbed Xiao Wanru with one hand and Madame Xiao with the other, mounted a Fergana horse and galloped forward. "Young master, be careful." Xiao Wanru couldn't help but exclaim when she saw Yiguchen's frail figure remaining where he was. At that moment, Yiguchen's lone figure gradually overlapped with the hazy and peerless figure in her heart. If I have to imagine what the sword master looks like, then it should be very similar to him, Xiao Wanru thought to herself as she stared at Yiguchen's back. Although Xiao Wanru had misunderstood Yiguchen's casual words as slandering the sword master, she was a little unhappy. But now Yiguchen's figure, which was left behind by himself, touched Xiao Wanru's heart. There was a ripple in her heart. However, Xiao Wanru also knew that with Madame Zhao's attitude, it was impossible for her to have any interaction with this young man of unknown origin. Her fate was only to become Shentamiao's wife. The holy son of Xueling remained calm as he watched Xiao Lai and the others leave. He wasn't in a hurry to catch Xiao Lai. They couldn't run too far with an injured woman. What attracted the holy son of Xueling's attention was the mysterious young man wearing a bamboo hat in front of him. Even a fool would know that Yiguchen was extraordinary when he saw him casually kill a group of totem warriors. Although the holy son of Xueling was cruel and perverted, he wasn't stupid. He knew that the young man in front of him was extraordinary. "Who are you?" The holy son of Xueling's tone had a rare trace of seriousness. The power of Yiguchen's 6-meridian godly sword had made him frown. "The person who will kill you," Yiguchen said lightly. "Arrogant boy." The holy son of Xueling hadn't moved yet, but the group of totem warriors around him roared. The holy son and holy daughter of the barbarian tribe had a high status and were respected. These totem warriors naturally couldn't be indifferent. Accompanied by bursts of roars and surging blood light, these totem warriors directly activated their own totems. Blood sky toad, blood ardent bird, blood sucking demonic mosquito, elite totems of the blood barbarian tribe emerged from the totem warriors' bodies, blooming with blood light. Their auras also surged like a geyser. "Kill!" A group of totem warriors rushed forward. With the help of the totem power, their moves were more powerful. At the same time, they could also perform some totem possession skills. But these moves were useless against Yiguchen. He withdrew the Netherese broadsword with a flip of his hand, and the wide and heavy pitch-black body of the sword was like a shield that completely blocked all these moves. Then, Yiguchen's heavy sword swept out. The vigorous sword qi was like a wave, spreading out with him as the origin. The totem warriors were hit by this sword wave. They spat out mouthfuls of blood along with their broken organs. They were sent flying upside down like kites with broken strings. The ferocious sword ripples shattered their internal organs. Yiguchen only swept out with his sword, and this group of totem warriors had suffered heavy casualties. They could no longer fight. "Are you from the 7 forces?" There was no trace of contempt or ridicule in the blood spirit saint's eyes. If he still looked down on Yiguchen now, he would be really stupid. The blood spirit saint took out a blood-red bone whip, which looked like it was pieced together by vertebrae. A strong blood-red totem power wrapped around the bone whip. No matter who you are, since you have provoked me, you can only die. But I won't kill you immediately. Instead, I will cut off your limbs and throw you into the hemolytic demon pool. I will let you watch your body melt bit by bit. The blood spirit saint waved the blood-red bone whip with a cruel smile on his face. Yiguchen's eyes were indifferent. Most of the barbarians were cruel, and the blood barbarians specialized in the Tao of blood and had many cruel means. Yiguchen's main purpose in coming to the great wilderness mansion was not to deal with the barbarians. But in the face of such a cruel and bloody barbarian tribe, Yiguchen would not show mercy. Chapter 383. The Saint of Blood Spirit dashed forward, holding the scarlet bone whip in his hand, and lashed it at Yiguchen. Yiguchen waved his Xianming heavy sword and chopped down. A terrifying shock wave spread out. The Saint of Blood Spirit narrowed his eyes, and a strong scarlet totem power spread out from his body. His whip whizzed out like a scarlet python. Yiguchen blocked the attack with his sword. The Xianming heavy sword was like a thick shield, blocking the attack of the scarlet bone whip. Clang! The bone whip and the heavy sword collided, and sparks burst out with the sound of metal clashing. However, to the Saint of Blood Spirit's surprise, Yiguchen did not take a step back despite the power of his whip. You have some skills. At this moment, the Saint of Blood Spirit stopped looking down on Jian Wushuang. In his eyes, this young man with a bamboo hat was a strong opponent on the same level. You are a genius from the 7 superpowers? The Saint of Blood Spirit held the scarlet bone whip tightly. You talk a lot of nonsense. Yiguchen looked indifferent. He swung his sword again. The Xianming heavy sword seemed to have the power to destroy everything. A fierce sword wave spread out and cracked the narrow road in front of him. You are too arrogant. The Saint of Blood Spirit's eyes darkened. Even the geniuses from the 7 superpowers were on the same level as them. Yiguchen's indifferent attitude and tone made it seem that he did not take the Saint of Blood Spirit seriously at all. The Saint of Blood Spirit rushed forward with the whip in one hand, and the other hand suddenly reached out. Vigorous blood-red totem power gathered in his arm, making his arm look like it was made of fresh blood. His entire arm was a strange dark red. Blood demon hand. The Saint of Blood Spirit's bone whip wrapped around Yiguchen's Xianming heavy sword, and then he swung it hard. Yiguchen's heavy sword immediately moved to one side. Then, Saint Son of Xueling's blood demon hand slapped hard at Yiguchen's chest. Yiguchen also reached out his other hand and added half of the power of the invincible Vajra body. The golden light on his palm was tinged with cyan light. He clashed with the blood demon hand of the blood demon. Bang! True Qi collided with the totem power, bursting out a circle of ripples. Xueling Holy Sun's expression suddenly changed the moment they exchanged blows. Yangming felt a terrifying force crushing down on him inch by inch from his arm, and he could even clearly hear the sound of his bones cracking. Cough! The Saint of Xueling retreated quickly. The blood demon arm was trembling violently. However, although he was surprised by Yiguchen's terrifying strength, there was still a sinister sneer on his face as he said, "This blood demon's hand is mixed with 49 types of blood poison of my blood barbarian tribe. Even a divine soul expert will die upon contact. Boy, you are still too inexperienced." Saint Son of Xueling sneered, as if his plan had succeeded and he was sure of victory. Yiguchen raised his hand slightly and saw a layer of dark red blood poison spreading from his palm to his arm. However, Yiguchen did not care at all. His invincible Vajra body was extremely resistant to all kinds of poisons. In his body, there were also the heavenly fire and heavenly thunder, which could naturally restrain all kinds of poisons. Yiguchen operated his body slightly, and the heavenly sun Xianming fire and purple void thunder were transmitted to his arm along his tendons and meridians. There was a sizzling sound coming from Yiguchen's arm. The thick dark red blood poison directly turned into white smoke, rising and being annihilated. This Saint son of Xueling's eyes almost popped out when he saw Yiguchen's arm was as good as new. Because he was the saint of the blood barbarian tribe, he clearly knew the power of the blood poison. He had once used the blood demon hand to poison some talents of the 7 superpowers to death and turn them into a pool of blood. You think you can kill me with this unorthodox method? Yiguchen's lips curled into a trace of coldness. He directly used the shadow steps, and his body moved quickly, leaving behind a residual shadow, rushing towards Saint Son of Xueling. Saint Son of Xueling's eyelids twitched. Only then did he realize that the young man in front of him was difficult to deal with. It could be said that if Yiguchen was not afraid of the blood poison, then Saint Son of Xueling's various methods would be weakened by at least 30%. Blood bomb. Saint Son of Xueling released all his totem power, which rolled and condensed into balls of blood-red energy light, and rushed toward Yiguchen. Yiguchen loosened his hand and put the Xianming heavy sword back into the natal ring. The Xianming heavy sword had the effect of suppressing genuine qi. The moment it left his hand, Yiguchen's genuine qi burst out and speed soared again. That ghostly speed made Saint Son of Xueling break out in a cold sweat. Yiguchen directly passed through the balls of blood-red energy light. With a flip of his hand, he held the blood prison sword in his hand. Saint Son of Xueling lashed out the blood-red bone whip in his hand again, and it directly hit Yiguchen's body. However, before Saint Son of Xueling could smile, he was shocked to find that the bone whip had directly passed through Yiguchen's body. Then, in the next moment, Saint Son of Xueling felt his hair stand on end and his spine tremble. Oh no! Saint Son of Xueling hurriedly moved aside. A blood-red long sword directly penetrated his shoulder from the back. The piercing pain made Saint Son of Xueling scream. Yiguchen's eyes were cold. He had used the shadow-killing swordsmanship, instant kill. Yiguchen raised his sword, and Saint Son of Xueling's left arm was directly cut off. It fell to the ground and blood spurted out. Ugh! Saint Son of Xueling screamed again. In desperation, he shook his sleeve, and a blood shadow suddenly rushed toward Yiguchen. Yiguchen's figure suddenly retreated, and the blood shadow directly increased in size. In the end, it turned into a blood-red centipede that was 3 feet long. Demonic beast. Seeing the blood-red centipede, Yiguchen was not surprised. The barbarian tribe was also very good at taming demonic beasts and making them their trump card. Many experts of the dynasties were very afraid to fight with the barbarian tribe one-on-one because the barbarian tribe had the means to tame demonic beasts, which was equivalent to fighting 1 against 2. However, Yiguchen's eyes did not waver at all. On the other side, Saint Son of Xueling picked up the broken arm on the ground and looked at Yiguchen with great resentment. You are definitely from the 7 superpowers, but do you think that as the Saint Son of the blood barbarian tribe, this is all I can do? Saint Son of Xueling said coldly, and directly put the broken arm on his shoulder. Dense blood light spread out. Saint Son of Xueling took out another blood bottle and raised his head to drink the viscous liquid. The next moment, Yiguchen saw countless blood-red tentacles spread out from the broken arm and the incision. They connected with each other, and finally the whole arm was intact. Saint Son of Xueling shook the arm, and a cruel sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Maybe you don't know that the blood medicine extracted from the hemolytic demon pool of our blood barbarian tribe can heal any injury, no matter how serious it is. Now it's your turn. On the surface of Saint Son of Xueling, a dense blood-red light shone out, and finally formed a totem with terrible pressure. The supreme totem of the blood barbarian tribe, the 1,000-legged blood centipede. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.